I used to believe that if I supported my granddaughter through every struggle and hardship, she would someday appreciate the sacrifices I made. But I never imagined that the very girl I helped raise after her mother abandoned her would secretly take out $1 million life insurance policy on me, then plot to make my death look like an unfortunate fall in my own bathroom. What she didn't know was that I had already uncovered her scheme, and I was the one who set the real plan in motion. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Grandma Elaine, I transferred those investments like you asked. The returns should hit your account by Friday, my granddaughter, Olivia said, her voice carrying that practiced sweetness as she handed me a glass of water. I watched her carefully manicured hand extend toward me, the same hands I once held while teaching her to bake my special apple tarts when she was just 8 years old. I smiled and accepted the glass, noting how she lingered, watching intently, as I raised it to my lips. That's wonderful, sweetheart. That money will help with your wedding plans. Marcus seems like such a nice young man. Her eyes brightened at the mention of her fiancé. He's amazing, Grandma. We're still deciding between the lakeside gardens and Mountain View for the venue. Both are gorgeous, but so expensive. She hesitated slightly, then added with practiced casualness, the financial advisor mentioned you might want to consider releasing more of your retirement fund, to enjoy life more while you can. I recognized the familiar tactic, the suggestion disguised as concern, always circling back to my money. At 74, I wasn't the frail, forgetful grandmother. She clearly wished I was. The water glass felt suddenly heavy in my hand, and I set it down untouched on the coffee table. I'll think about it, I said softly. Though at my age, I need to be careful with my savings. Something flickered across her face. Disappointment, perhaps frustration, before she quickly recovered with a smile. Of course, Grandma, I just want you to enjoy your golden years. As she turned to check her phone, I studied her profile. Olivia had her mother's striking features, the high cheekbones, almond-shaped eyes, the smile that seemed to promise warmth but never quite reached. Those eyes. My daughter Rebecca had abandoned Olivia when she was just 6, leaving me to raise her while Rebecca chased one boyfriend after another across the country. I had given Olivia everything: a stable home, private education, emotional support through her turbulent teenage years, even the down payment for her first apartment. Now, at 29, she visited me twice weekly with dutiful regularity, always bringing small gifts, always asking about my investments and retirement accounts. I should get going, Olivia said, checking her watch. Marcus is waiting. We're meeting with the caterer. She leaned down, pressed a kiss to my cheek, and gestured to the water. Make sure you stay hydrated, Grandma. Dr. Wilson said it's important for your blood pressure. After she left, I waited 15 minutes before carefully pouring the water into a sealed container I had hidden in my knitting basket. It would be the 4th sample I'd collected this month. Something wasn't right, and I intended to find out what. The laboratory results had arrived yesterday, hidden in an envelope marked Garden Club newsletter, a precaution I'd taken to ensure Olivia wouldn't intercept it if she checked my mail, which she often did under the guise of helpfulness. The paper had trembled in my hands as I read the findings. Trace amounts of colorless, odorless ethylene glycol, antifreeze, in every water sample. Not enough to kill immediately, but sufficient to cause gradual kidney damage that would appear as natural deterioration in someone my age. Sat in my quiet living room, surrounded by photographs documenting our life together. Olivia's graduation, her college acceptance, Christmas mornings and birthday celebrations, moments I'd treasured, believing we shared a bond that transcended blood. The betrayal burned like acid in my chest. What had turned the little girl who once crawled into my bed during thunderstorms into a woman who could methodically poison her own grandmother? Was it the money? The inheritances and life insurance she thought would come her way? Or had something in her always been broken in, a way I'd refused to see? I remembered the unexpected visit 3 months ago from Sandra, my former neighbor. She had moved to Arizona last year but stopped by while visiting relatives. I wasn't going to say anything, Sandra had whispered, her eyes darting nervously to the doorway as if Olivia might appear. But I overheard her at Jackson's Insurance, downtown, back before I moved. She was talking about a life insurance policy for an elderly relative. A big one. She mentioned your name, Elaine. I thought maybe you knew. I hadn't known. But that conversation had planted the first seed of suspicion, compelling me to start paying attention to patterns I'd previously ignored. The insistence that I take vitamins she provided, the water she always prepared, her sudden interest in managing my finances. The final confirmation came last week. While Olivia was supposedly using my bathroom, I noticed her rifling through my medicine cabinet, examining each prescription bottle carefully. When she emerged, she suggested, "I switch pharmacies to one that delivered, to make things easier for you, Grandma." The same evening, I discovered my will had been moved from its usual place in my desk drawer, the pages slightly out of order. Now, sitting alone in my house, I felt the weight of decades of love and sacrifice crumbling around me. The photographs on my walls suddenly seemed like artifacts from a fiction I had created, a happy family that never truly existed. The granddaughter I thought I knew was a carefully constructed illusion. My hands trembled as I reached for the phone. Not from fear, but from a cold, clear resolve that had crystallized inside me. Olivia believed she was dealing with a trusting, oblivious old woman. She had no idea that before retirement, I had spent 40 years as a paralegal specializing in estate fraud. I had seen countless scams, manipulations, and betrayals. I knew exactly how this game was played. "Dr. Wilson's office," a cheerful voice answered. "Yes, this is Elaine Garcia." "I need to speak with the doctor about some concerning test results," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. As I waited on hold, I glanced at the calendar where Olivia had helpfully circled my upcoming appointments. The lawyer, to simplify my estate, the financial advisor to consolidate my accounts, and the weekend trip to her lakeside cottage to get some fresh air. The perfect place for an elderly woman to have an unfortunate accident. What Olivia didn't realize was that I had already begun setting my own pieces into motion. The game she thought she was winning was about to change entirely. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. And I intended to serve it cold. The morning sun filtered through my kitchen curtains as I heard the familiar sound of Olivia's car pulling into my driveway. 2 days had passed since I'd sent the water samples to the lab, and I had spent every waking hour since then meticulously documenting everything, photographing the tainted water containers, recording our conversations on my old dictaphone hidden in my cardigan pocket, and writing detailed notes of every suspicious interaction over the past 6 months. I smoothed my cardigan, took a steadying breath, and prepared to give the performance of my life. "Grandma, I brought those scones you love from Mulligan's Bakery," Olivia called out cheerfully as she let herself in with her key. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, a pastry box in one hand and her designer purse in the other. Today she wore an expensive-looking cream blouse and tailored pants, clothes that cost more than a month of my pension, despite her modest job as an event coordinator. "That's so thoughtful, sweetheart," I said, smiling warmly as if nothing had changed, as if I didn't know that she was slowly poisoning me. I was just about to make some tea. "Let me do that for you," she insisted quickly, setting down her things and moving toward the kettle. "You shouldn't be on your feet so much." I watched her carefully as she prepared the tea, noting how she positioned herself to block my view of the cups. Her shoulders moved in a subtle way that suggested she was adding something to one of the mugs. "I spoke with Aaron yesterday," she said casually, referring to her fiancé's friend who worked as a financial advisor. "He had some great suggestions about how to structure your accounts to minimize taxes." "Did he?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I settled into my chair at the kitchen table, maintaining my expression of mild interest. That's nice of him to think of me. She set the tea in front of me, and I noticed how her eyes fixed momentarily on the mug, a flicker of anticipation crossing her features. He said, "We should meet next week. Given your health concerns lately, it makes sense to simplify everything." "My health concerns?" I echoed, feigning confusion. "Grandma, you know you've been more forgetful lately." Her voice took on that condescending gentleness that made my skin crawl. "Last week, you couldn't remember where you put your checkbook, and Dr. Wilson mentioned your kidney function tests weren't ideal." Of course they weren't, not with what she'd been putting in my water. I wondered how she'd gained access to my medical information, but then remembered she'd insisted on driving me to appointments lately, always finding reasons to speak with my doctor privately. "I suppose you're right," I conceded, lifting the tea but not drinking it. "Speaking of finances, I've been thinking about the future." Olivia leaned forward eagerly, her interest visibly piqued. "Oh?" "I've worked so hard all these years, saved everything I could." I sighed dramatically. "What's the point if I can't help my family? Maybe it's time I updated my will, made things clearer." The gleam in her eyes intensified, though she quickly masked it with a concerned frown. "Grandma, don't talk like that. You're going to be around for years yet." Not if she had her way, I thought bitterly. Still, at my age, it's sensible to be prepared. I reached across the table and patted her hand. "You're all I have, Olivia. Everything I've built, all I've saved, it's for you." She squeezed my hand, in return, and I suppressed a shudder at her touch. "Thank you, Grandma. But really, I'd rather have you than any inheritance." The lie hung in the air between us, almost tangible in its audacity. I nodded as if moved by her sentiment. "Actually," I continued, "I've been wondering if I should sell the house. It's too big for just me, and the stairs are getting difficult." Olivia's eyes widened slightly. The house, my mortgage-free, 3-bedroom colonial in one of the city's most desirable neighborhoods, was worth nearly $650,000. "Really? What would you do instead?" "I thought perhaps I could move in with you and Marcus after the wedding." I watched her expression carefully. "Just temporarily, until I find a smaller place. I'd contribute to your household expenses, of course." The flash of horror that crossed her face was almost comical. "Oh, Grandma, I don't know if that would work. Our condo is so small, and you'd hate being away from your garden." "You're probably right," I conceded. "Maybe I should just stay here. The money from selling would only complicate my taxes anyway." I deliberately looked down at my tea, then back at her with a conspiratorial smile. "Between you and me, I've been thinking of making a significant cash gift to you before the wedding, something the government doesn't need to know about." That got her attention. Her posture straightened, her focus sharpening like a predator spotting prey. "What kind of gift?" "I have some money that never went into the bank," I said in a lowered voice. "From your grandfather's life insurance. I've kept it in the house all these years. This was completely fabricated. My late husband Harold's modest insurance policy had gone entirely toward paying off our mortgage decades ago. But I needed to offer bait that would be irresistible." How much?" Olivia stammered, trying and failing to sound casual. "Around 90,000, I whispered. "In cash. I've never told anyone." Her eyes widened, genuine surprise replacing her calculated expressions. This wasn't part of her plan. This was better than her plan. "Where do you keep it?" she asked, then quickly added, "I mean, is that safe, Grandma? Having so much cash in the house?" "It's well hidden," I assured her with a wink. "I'll show you. Before your lakeside trip this weekend, it can be my early wedding present." Olivia's face lit up with unmistakable greed. "That's incredibly generous," she breathed, reaching for her phone. I should let Marcus know our weekend plans are still on. As she texted furiously, I used the opportunity to pour my tea into the potted plant beside me when she wasn't looking. When she glanced back, I was holding an empty cup. Delicious tea, dear. Thank you. She smiled with satisfaction, clearly believing her plan was progressing perfectly. Meanwhile, I mentally reviewed the contents of the safety deposit box at my bank. The lab results, the recorded conversations, the financial documentation showing how she'd attempted to manipulate my accounts. The weekend at the lakeside cottage was approaching. Olivia believed she was orchestrating my final days. She had no idea I was writing the script. I never intended to eavesdrop. Even after discovering what Olivia had been doing, some part of me still hoped there might be an explanation. Something that could soften the brutal reality that my own granddaughter was trying to kill me. The day after our conversation about the non-existent cash, Olivia returned unexpectedly. I had been resting in my bedroom when I heard her key in the lock. Curious about this unscheduled visit, I remained quiet, listening to her movements downstairs. She wasn't alone. "It's perfect," I heard her say. "The bathroom is upstairs at the end of the hall. Grandma always takes a bath before bed. Her balance isn't good anymore." A male voice responded, not her fiancé Marcus, but someone with a deeper, rougher tone. "And you're sure about the money? 90,000 in cash?" "That's what she said," Olivia replied. "Plus the insurance money after everything's done. $1 million, straight to me as the beneficiary." My hand instinctively covered my mouth to stifle a gasp. Hearing it stated so plainly, so coldly, was different from suspecting it. "What about security systems?" the man asked. "Cameras?" Olivia laughed. "She's an old lady living alone. The only security system is the deadbolt, and I have a key." I eased off my bed silently, my heart pounding, and crept closer to my bedroom door to hear better. "The lakeside cottage is even more isolated," Olivia continued. "No neighbors for half a mile. We can make it look like she wandered out at night, confused, and fell into the water. By the time anyone finds her, the antifreeze will be hard to detect. The medical examiner will see an elderly woman with kidney problems who accidentally drowned." I felt ice spreading through my veins. This wasn't just opportunistic poisoning. This was a calculated murder plot. "You've put a lot of thought into this," the man observed, sounding impressed. "I've been planning it for months," Olivia said, a note of pride in her voice. The antifreeze was just to weaken her, make her seem more confused and frail to everyone. "Dr. Wilson already thinks she's declining rapidly. How long have you been dosing her?" "About 4 months, small amounts, nothing that would raise alarms, just enough to damage her kidneys gradually." 4 months. The timeline matched perfectly with when I'd started feeling unusually tired and experiencing strange symptoms. I'd attributed it to age, to the natural decline of my body. How blind I had been, how trusting. "What about the old woman's neighbors? Won't they be suspicious?" the man asked. "Everyone already knows she's been confused lately," Olivia said, and I could hear the air quotes in her voice. "I've made sure of that. Told the neighbors she's been forgetting things, making up stories. Mrs. Kravitz next door thinks she has early dementia." My legs nearly gave out beneath me. It wasn't enough that Olivia was poisoning me. She had been systematically destroying my reputation and credibility as well, preparing the ground so that no one would question my death. I heard footsteps on the stairs, and I retreated quickly, silently, back to my bed. Through my barely open door, I saw Olivia leading a tall, rough-looking man down the hallway toward my bathroom. "See? The tub is old, no safety rails. We remove the bath mat, maybe leave some water on the floor. She slips, hits her head, and that's that. But the lake is still cleaner. No questions about why she was taking a bath in the first place." The man nodded, studying the bathroom layout with professional interest. The cottage plan is better, simpler, but I'll be ready either way. This is just backup, Olivia agreed, if she balks at going to the cottage. They retreated downstairs, and I remained frozen on my bed, listening to their voices fade as they moved toward the kitchen. A few minutes later, I heard the front door close. I sat still for a long time, my hands trembling in my lap. The conversation replayed in my mind, each word cutting deeper than the last. It was one thing to suspect betrayal, to find evidence of poisoning. It was another entirely to hear my own granddaughter discuss my murder as casually as if she were planning a dinner party. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside me. Whatever sentiment, whatever familial love had tempered my response until now, evaporated completely. The woman downstairs wasn't my granddaughter anymore. She was a predator, and I was her prey. Or so she thought. I reached for my phone with hands that no longer shook. First, I called my bank and arranged to access my safety deposit box the next morning. Then I called my old colleague from the law firm, Barbara, who had retired just 2 years after me. "Barbara, it's Elaine," I said when she answered. "I need your help and I need absolute discretion." "Elaine? You sound strange. What's wrong?" "I can't explain over the phone." "Can you meet me tomorrow at Carter's Cafe at 11? Barbara must have heard the urgency in my voice. "Of course. Should I be worried?" "Not about me," I said grimly. "But Olivia should be." After hanging up, I moved to my closet and pulled out an old shoebox from the back corner. Inside was a small digital voice recorder, a gift from a grateful client years ago. I had never found a use for it until now. I placed it carefully in my cardigan pocket and made my way downstairs. The house was empty again, but evidence of their visit remained. A cabinet door left slightly ajar, the faint scent of unfamiliar cologne. I walked through each room methodically, checking if anything was missing or disturbed. In the kitchen, I found what I was looking for. My evening pill organizer had been tampered with. The tiny blue blood pressure tablet in Thursday's compartment had been replaced with a similar-looking but slightly larger pill. I carefully removed it with tweezers and placed it in a small plastic bag, adding it to my growing collection of evidence. Then I replaced it with my actual medication from the original bottle. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my armchair by the window watching the street, the recorder running in my pocket. I wasn't certain that Olivia and her accomplice wouldn't return, that they wouldn't decide tonight was the night to end their waiting game. As the hours passed, I found myself revisiting memories of Olivia as a child, her small hand in mine as we crossed streets, her delighted laughter when I taught her to bake, the nights I held her while she cried for the mother who never came back. Where had I gone? Wrong? What had I missed? How had the sweet, vulnerable child transformed into someone capable of such calculated cruelty? Perhaps it had always been there, hidden beneath the surface. Or perhaps the world had hardened her in ways I couldn't see or prevent. Either way, the reckoning was coming. Dawn broke, painting my living room with soft golden light. The night had passed without incident. I rose stiffly from my chair, my resolve hardened like steel. "You want to play games, Olivia?" I whispered to the empty room. "Let's play." The cafe was busy when I arrived the next morning, which suited my purposes perfectly. The background noise would make it difficult for anyone to overhear our conversation, and the crowd provided anonymity. I'd chosen a corner table with a clear view of the entrance, and I'd arrived 20 minutes early to ensure I'd see Barbara come in. I ordered a cup of tea. I had no intention of drinking and waited, my handbag clutched tightly in my lap. Inside was everything I'd gathered so far: lab reports, photographs, the suspicious pill, and the voice recorder with yesterday's damning conversation. Barbara arrived precisely at 11, punctual as always. At 68, she remained as sharp and formidable as during our days working together at Morrison and Blackwell. Her silver hair was cut in a practical bob, and she scanned the room with shrewd eyes before spotting me. "Elaine," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "You look terrible." I managed a weak smile. "Thank you for your candor, as always." She waved away the pleasantry. "What's going on? You sounded like you were planning someone's funeral." On the phone. "Not mine," I said quietly, "though that's what Olivia has been planning." Barbara's expression didn't change, but her posture straightened. She'd always been good at receiving shocking information without revealing her reaction, a skill that had served her well during 4 decades as a paralegal, specializing in criminal cases. "Explain," she said simply, and so I did. I laid out everything chronologically, from the first suspicions to yesterday's overheard conversation. I showed her the lab reports and played a portion of the recording. Throughout my explanation, Barbara remained silent, taking notes in the small leather-bound notebook she always carried. When I finished, she closed her notebook and looked at me with the same analytical gaze I'd seen her direct at countless legal puzzles over the years. "You have enough evidence for the police," she said finally. "I know." I stared down at my untouched tea. "But I'm not going to the police, not yet." Barbara raised an eyebrow. "Why not? This is attempted murder, Elaine." I leaned forward. "Because I want her to admit what she's done, to my face. I want to understand why. And—" I hesitated, then continued. "I want her to face consequences that can't be dodged with a clever lawyer or a plea deal." "What exactly are you planning?" Barbara's voice held a note of caution. "Justice," I said simply. "But I need your help." After our meeting, I walked home slowly, my mind churning with everything we'd discussed. Barbara had agreed to help, though reluctantly. She'd always been the more cautious of us, preferring to work within the system despite its flaws. But she also understood my need for answers, for a reckoning that went beyond the clinical process of the legal system. When I reached my house, I paused at the front step, suddenly overwhelmed by what it represented. This had been my home for 43 years. I'd raised my daughter Rebecca here, and later Olivia. Every corner held memories. Christmas mornings, birthday celebrations, quiet evenings reading stories before bedtime. I had believed it was a place of safety, of love. Now it felt tainted, poisoned like the water Olivia had been giving me. Inside, I moved from room to room as if seeing the house for the first time. The floral couch where I'd held Olivia through her nightmares. The kitchen table where we'd done homework together. The backyard where I'd taught her to plant spring bulbs. In the living room, I stopped before the large family photo taken at Olivia's college graduation. She stood between me and Harold, her smile radiant, her future seemingly bright and full of promise. My late husband's arm was around her shoulders, his face beaming with pride. "What would you do, Harold?" I whispered to his image. "How did we fail her so completely?" Grief washed over me in waves, not just for my own betrayal, but for the granddaughter I thought I knew. The girl in that photograph was gone, if she had ever truly existed at all. In her place was a stranger wearing a familiar face, a predator with cold, calculating eyes. I sank onto the couch, finally allowing the tears I'd been holding back. They came in silent streams at first, then in deep, wrenching sobs that left me gasping. I grieved for the relationship I'd thought we had, for the love I'd given so freely and completely. I grieved for the future family gatherings that would never happen, for the great-grandchildren I would never hold. Most of all, I grieved for the little girl who had once trusted me with her fears and dreams, who had looked at me with genuine adoration. What had happened to twist that child into someone capable of such calculated cruelty? When the tears finally subsided, I felt hollow, emptied of sentiment. In that emptiness, something else began to grow. A cold, clear resolve that left no room for hesitation or second thoughts. I went to my bedroom and opened the closet, pulling out an old leather suitcase from the top shelf. Inside were keepsakes I'd preserved from Olivia's childhood. Report cards, artwork, school photographs charting her growth from a gap-toothed 6-year-old to a polished high school graduate. I laid them out on my bed one by one, searching for clues I might have missed, warnings I had overlooked. Had there been signs of this darkness even then? A pattern of deceit, of manipulation, of using others for her own gain. There were small incidents that now took on new significance. The time money went missing from a teacher's purse, and Olivia had a new bracelet the following week. The friendship that ended abruptly after Olivia borrowed and lost the girls. Expensive necklace. The tearful apologies that always seemed to arrive precisely when she needed something from me. I had excused it all, rationalized it away. She was young, still learning. She was struggling with her mother's abandonment. She needed guidance, not judgment. I had been willfully blind. By evening, I had packed away the mementos and locked the suitcase, storing it in the attic. Whatever sentimental attachment I'd had to those memories was severed now. They belonged to a narrative that no longer existed. I sat at my kitchen table, notebook open before me, and began to write. Not reminiscences or regrets, but a plan, methodical, detailed, leaving nothing to chance. I knew Olivia better than anyone. I understood her weaknesses, her desires, her patterns. She believed she was hunting me. She had no idea she had become the prey. The weekend at the lakeside cottage was 3 days away. Plenty of time to put everything in motion. I picked up my phone and dialed. "Barbara, I need one more favor." I first met Olivia when she was 6 years old, a solemn child with wary eyes standing in my doorway clutching a tattered backpack. My daughter Rebecca stood behind her, one hand on Olivia's shoulder, the other holding a cigarette. "It's just for a few weeks, Mom," Rebecca had said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Until I get things figured out with Derek." Derek was the latest in a string of boyfriends, each one seemingly worse than the last. This one had a temper, according to the bruise, fading on Rebecca's cheekbone that she hadn't bothered to conceal. "Of course," I had said, kneeling to Olivia's eye level. "We're going to have fun together, sweetheart." Olivia had studied me with those serious eyes. Rebecca's eyes, but lacking the perpetual defiance. "Do you have books?" she'd asked finally. "Aye. Whole shelf of them," I'd promised. "And we can get more from the library." That had earned me the first hint of a smile. A few weeks turned into months. Rebecca's phone calls became less frequent, her promises to return more vague. By the time Olivia started first grade, she had her own bedroom in my house, decorated with butterfly decals and a bookshelf that grew steadily more crowded. I filed for legal guardianship when Olivia was 7, after Rebecca missed her daughter's birthday with no explanation. The court date came and went. Rebecca didn't show up to contest it. Later, she called from somewhere in Nevada, clearly intoxicated. "It's better this way," she'd slurred. "You were always better at the mom thing than me." I didn't argue. Truthfully, I was relieved. Relieved that Olivia would have stability, that I could make decisions about her education and health care without waiting for Rebecca's inconsistent input. Relieved that my granddaughter wouldn't be dragged from town to town, school to school, following Rebecca's chaotic life choices. Those early years were difficult but rewarding. Olivia had nightmares, separation anxiety, and periods of acting out. All normal reactions for a child who had been effectively abandoned. I arranged for therapy, maintained consistent routines, and never spoke ill of Rebecca, despite my own complicated feelings toward my daughter. By the time Olivia was 10, we had settled into a comfortable rhythm. She excelled academically, devoured books, and showed a particular talent for mathematics. I attended every school event, cheered at her spelling bees, and helped with science fair projects that grew increasingly sophisticated. Harold, my husband, adored her. He taught her to play chess, took her fishing at the lake, and never once treated her as anything less than his own grandchild. When he suffered his first heart attack when Olivia was 12, she spent hours at his hospital bedside, reading to him from his favorite mystery novels. "You've got a special one there," he told me one night as we watched her sleeping in the chair beside his bed. "Smart as a whip, but there's something else. A kind of intensity. She's going to make her mark on the world." I had nodded, swelling with pride. She just needs the right opportunities. Looking back now, I wondered if Harold had sensed something I had missed. Had that intensity he observed been the first sign of something darker? Or had life's hardships twisted what could have been ambition and determination into something more sinister? The cracks began to show during Olivia's teenage years. Small lies at first, about homework completion, about where she'd been after school. Then larger deceptions, the credit card I didn't remember applying for, arriving in the mail with her name on it. The weekend study group that turned out to be an unsupervised party where police were called. Each time she had explanations, apologies, tears. And each time I chose to believe her, to give her another chance. She was a teenager, I reasoned. Testing boundaries was normal. Besides, hadn't she earned some grace? After all she'd been through with Rebecca's abandonment? When Harold died suddenly from a second massive heart attack, Olivia was 16. Her grief seemed genuine. She organized his photographs, created a memorial slideshow for the funeral, and slept with his old cardigan for weeks afterward. Yet 3 days after the funeral, I found her and her friends drinking Harold's prized 30-year-old scotch in our living room while I was supposedly at a grief support group. When confronted, she flew into a rage. "He's not even your real grandfather," she had shouted, eyes blazing. "Why do you care?" The words stung like a physical blow. It was the first time she had ever thrown her biological lineage in my face. The first time she had rejected Harold's role in her life. I had raised my voice then, one of the few times I'd ever done so with her. "Harold loved you from the moment he met you. He was more of a grandfather to you than your biological one ever was or wanted to be." She had stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. When she returned hours later, she was tearful, contrite, claiming the outburst came from grief and confusion. "I didn't mean it, Grandma," she'd sobbed against my shoulder. "I miss him so much." And I had forgiven her. Of course I had. After Harold's death, I poured myself into ensuring Olivia's future. The life insurance policy paid off our remaining mortgage, and I dedicated the rest to her college fund. My own retirement savings would have to be enough for me. She graduated high school with honors and was accepted to Westridge University with a partial scholarship. I covered the remaining tuition, her apartment near campus, and a monthly allowance, generous enough that she wouldn't need to work during the school year. "You focus on your studies," I told her. "That's your job right now." College seemed to mature her. Her calls home were regular, her visits during breaks filled with stories of classes and new friends. She switched majors twice before settling. On business administration, with a minor in finance. "I want to understand money," she explained. "Real wealth, not just getting by." There was something in her tone that gave me pause, a hunger that seemed to go beyond healthy ambition. But I dismissed it as the natural drive of a young woman who had grown up with financial insecurity. The summer before her senior year, Rebecca made a surprise reappearance. 8 years had passed since her last visit. She arrived unannounced, thinner than I remembered, with a nervous energy that set my teeth on edge. Olivia was cold toward her mother, barely acknowledging her presence. When Rebecca tentatively suggested they spend some time together, just the two of them, Olivia had laughed. "What would be the point?" she'd asked with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We're strangers." Rebecca had flinched, but nodded. "That's fair. I just thought maybe we could try." "Try?" Olivia's voice had taken on an edge I'd never heard before. "You didn't try when I was 6 or 7 or for my birthdays or Christmases. Why start now?" I had intervened then, suggesting we all have dinner together. But the evening was a disaster. Rebecca asked about Olivia's college experience, her friends, her plans after graduation. Olivia answered in monosyllables, each response more cutting than the last. After dinner, when Olivia had gone upstairs, Rebecca sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee she wasn't drinking. "She hates me," she said quietly. "She's hurt," I had corrected, though I wasn't entirely sure that was accurate. The emotion I'd seen in Olivia's eyes hadn't looked like pain. It had looked like contempt. Rebecca left the next morning. 3 months later, we received news that she had died of an overdose in a motel room in Arizona. The memorial service was sparsely attended. Olivia sat dry-eyed through the brief ceremony, left immediately afterward, and never mentioned her mother again. I grieved for my daughter, for the troubled, beautiful girl she had been, for the woman she never had the chance to become. I grieved for the relationship she and Olivia might have rebuilt someday, but mostly, I grieved for the little girl who had once asked about her mommy every night before bed, who had kept Rebecca's faded photograph under her pillow until she was 10. That little girl seemed gone, replaced by someone I sometimes struggled to recognize. After graduation, Olivia moved back home briefly before finding a job at an event planning company and her own apartment in the city. Our relationship settled into a comfortable routine: Sunday dinners, occasional shopping trips, holiday celebrations. If she seemed more interested in my financial affairs than my daily life, I attributed it to her business education and practical nature. If her visits became more frequent after I mentioned updating my will, I told myself she was simply being attentive to my needs as I aged. When had the subtle shift occurred? When had attentiveness become calculation? When had my granddaughter begun to see me not as family, but as an obstacle between her and what she wanted? Perhaps the seeds had always been there, dormant, waiting for the right conditions to grow. The sacrifices began small, almost imperceptible. A missed dinner with friends to attend Olivia's school play, postponing a vacation so I could help her prepare for final exams. Ordinary grandparent choices that felt natural, even joyful at the time. But as the years passed, the pattern deepened, etching itself into the very foundation of my existence. My life gradually rearranged itself with Olivia at its center, my own dreams and needs quietly stepping aside to make room for hers. When Olivia was 14, I had been offered a promotion at the law firm, office manager, with a substantial salary increase and the opportunity to finally use my business degree. The position required longer hours and occasional weekend work. That same week, Olivia made the debate team. Competitions would be held on Saturdays throughout the school year, often in neighboring cities that required transportation. I declined the promotion without hesitation. "Are you sure?" Harold had asked, watching me call the firm. "We could hire a driver for Olivia's competitions. This is a big opportunity for you." "There will be other opportunities," I said, already writing the debate schedule on our kitchen calendar. This is important to her. Harold didn't argue, but I caught the concern in his eyes. He had always been gently protective of my independence, worried that my tendency to put others first would eventually leave nothing for myself. When Olivia decided to apply to Westridge University, a prestigious school with tuition far beyond what we had saved, I took on freelance paralegal work in the evenings. For 2 years, I worked 60-hour weeks, carefully adding every extra dollar to her college fund. "Mom, you're running yourself into the ground," Rebecca said during one of her rare visits. She had watched me fall asleep at the dinner table, fork still in hand after a 14-hour day. "It's temporary," I insisted. "Olivia deserves the best education we can give her." Rebecca gave me a strange look. "At what cost? Your health? When does she start giving back?" I had bristled at the question, defensive of Olivia in a way I had never been of Rebecca. "She gives back every day. Her success will be my reward, the Kai." Truth was more complicated. Olivia rarely acknowledged the sacrifices, seemed to view them as her due. When she was accepted to Westridge with a partial scholarship, her focus wasn't on the tuition gap I would need to fill, but on which dorm would offer the best social connections. Still, I told myself this was normal. She was young, focused on her future. Gratitude would come with maturity. When Harold died, my world collapsed. He had been my partner for 41 years, my steadiest support, my greatest love. The grief was overwhelming, a physical weight pressing against my chest, making it difficult to breathe. Olivia had her own grief to process, I knew, but I was struck by how quickly her concerns turned practical. "What did the life insurance pay out?" she asked 2 weeks after the funeral. "Will it affect my college fund?" I was taken aback by the bluntness, but rationalized it as her way of seeking security during an uncertain time. "The policy covered the mortgage. Your college fund is separate and secure." She nodded, visibly relieved. "Good. And what about the rest of the finances? Do you have a plan?" I didn't, not really. Harold had handled most of our investments. I was still finding my footing in a world without him. But I straightened my shoulders and assured her everything would be fine. Her studies shouldn't be disrupted by my bereavement. That night, I sat alone at our kitchen table with a stack of financial documents, teaching myself the details of our retirement accounts, insurance policies, and investments. Not for myself, but so I could preserve Olivia's sense of security. My grief would have to wait. During Olivia's college years, my devotion manifested in weekly care packages filled with homemade cookies, gift cards, and hand-knit scarves. In winter drives through snowstorms to deliver a forgotten textbook. In middle-of-the-night phone calls when a relationship ended badly or an exam went poorly. I remodeled her childhood bedroom during her sophomore year, replacing the butterfly decals with sophisticated gray walls and a queen-sized bed. "For when you come home during breaks," I explained, though she rarely stayed longer than a weekend before taking off with friends. When she graduated, I threw an elaborate party, inviting family friends and her professors. I spent weeks preparing her favorite foods, decorating the backyard with fairy lights and flowers in her university colors. "You didn't need to go to all this trouble, Grandma," she said, glancing around at the carefully arranged tables. "It's no trouble," I assured her, though my back ached from days of preparation. "I'm so proud of you." She smiled and kissed my cheek before disappearing into the crowd of guests, spending most of the evening with her friends by the makeshift bar we'd set up. The following year, when Olivia found her first apartment, I offered to help with the security deposit. What I didn't tell her was that I took out a small home equity loan to do it, not wanting to touch my carefully managed retirement funds. "I can pay you back," she said as I handed her the check. "No need," I insisted. "Consider it a housewarming gift." She never mentioned repayment again. When Olivia met Marcus 2 years ago, I was cautiously optimistic. He seemed steady, responsible, a financial analyst with a quiet demeanor that balanced Olivia's more assertive personality. "He's good for her," I confided to Barbara over lunch. "Grounding." "And he has money," Barbara observed wryly. "Which doesn't hurt." I had bristled slightly at the implication. "Olivia's not materialistic." Barbara raised an eyebrow but said nothing further. When they got engaged 6 months ago, I was among the first to know. Olivia called, her voice breathless with excitement. "He proposed 2 carats, emerald cut, platinum band," she gushed. I noted that the ring's specifications came before any mention of love or future plans, but pushed the thought aside. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. When do I get to celebrate with you both?" "Actually," she hesitated slightly, "we were wondering if we could use your backyard for the engagement party. Professional venues are so expensive, and your garden is gorgeous. In spring." "Of course," I agreed immediately. "I'd be honored." The simple backyard gathering evolved into a catered event for 60 people. I spent thousands renovating the garden, hiring professional landscapers to create the perfect backdrop for Olivia's special day. During the party, I overheard Marcus asking Olivia about the cost. "Your grandmother paid for all this?" Olivia shrugged. "She wanted to. She has the money." I pretended not to hear, busying myself with refilling drink pitchers. 3 months later, when they began looking at wedding venues, Olivia casually mentioned that the average wedding in our area cost nearly $40,000. "That's quite an investment," I said carefully. "Well, you only get married once," she replied, then added with a laugh, "Hopefully." I understood the unspoken expectation. I had funded everything else in her life. Why would her wedding be different? That evening, I reviewed my finances. My retirement account was healthy, but not extravagant. The house was my most significant asset. I could take out another equity loan, perhaps, or sell some of Harold's collectibles. I never questioned whether I should contribute. That was what grandmothers did, wasn't it? Sacrifice, support, give without expectation of return. It was only later, after discovering Olivia's betrayal, that I realized the true cost of my devotion, not just in dollars spent or opportunities declined, but in the person it had allowed her to become. Someone who could look at the woman who had raised her, who had given everything, and see nothing but an obstacle to inheritance. Someone who could serve poison with a smile. I had given Olivia my life. Now she wanted my death as well. The day after meeting with Barbara, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, a cup of untainted tea, and 23 years of memories to reassess. If I was going to confront Olivia, I needed to understand when and how things had gone so wrong. I drew a timeline, starting with the day Rebecca left Olivia with me. Along this chronology, I began noting incidents that had troubled me at the time, but that I had dismissed or rationalized away. Viewed individually, each could be explained as a child's misstep, a teenager's rebellion, a young adult's self-interest. But together, they formed a pattern I had been willfully blind to for decades. When Olivia was 9, her teacher called me about a missing bracelet. A classmate's birthday gift had disappeared from her desk and somehow ended up among Olivia's things. Olivia claimed the girl had given it to her, which the classmate vehemently denied. "Children often misunderstand the concept of ownership," the teacher had explained gently. Olivia may have convinced herself it was a gift. I had nodded, apologized, and later that evening sat Olivia down for a gentle conversation about respecting others' belongings. She had listened solemnly, eyes wide and tearful, promising it would never happen again. 2 weeks later, I found a small gold locket in her jewelry box, one I recognized as belonging to our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Finch. When questioned, Olivia burst into tears. "She showed it to me last week when I helped bring in her groceries," she sobbed. "I thought she was giving it to me. I didn't mean to steal it." I had returned the locket with my own tearful apologies. Mrs. Finch was gracious, insisting it was a simple misunderstanding. I believed that too, wanted to believe it. But now, thinking back, I remembered the calculation in Olivia's eyes before the tears began. How quickly the story came, fully formed. How she had volunteered to help Mrs. Finch that day, something she had never offered to do before or since. At 12, Olivia went through a phase of finding money around the house. $20 from my purse, $30 from the grocery fund, $50 from the envelope where I kept emergency cash. "It was on the floor," she would insist. "I was going to tell you, but I forgot." Each time I would explain the importance of honesty, of immediately returning money that wasn't hers. Each time she would appear contrite, only for the pattern to repeat weeks later. When I mentioned my concerns to her therapist, he suggested it might be related to the financial insecurity of her early years with Rebecca. Perhaps having money made her feel safe. That made sense. I stopped leaving cash where she might find it, and the incident ceased. Problem solved, I thought. But had it been? Or had she simply become more selective, more careful about what she took and when? In high school, her friend group shifted. Constantly. Girls who had been inseparable from Olivia for months would suddenly disappear from her life, replaced by new companions. When I asked about these vanished friends, Olivia would shrug. "We grew apart," she'd say. Or, "She got jealous when I was made team captain." Or, "Her boyfriend kept hitting on me, so it got weird." There was always a plausible explanation that positioned Olivia as either the victim or the reasonably aggrieved party. I never questioned deeper, never reached out to the parents of these former friends to hear their side. Why hadn't I? Because I didn't want to know, I realize now. Because the pattern might have become too clear to ignore. The incidents continued, into adulthood, evolving in sophistication. There was the misunderstanding with her college roommate, who accused Olivia of using her credit card for online shopping. Olivia had called me in tears, insisting it was a mistake, that she'd thought she was using her own card on a shared computer. I paid the disputed charges without question. Of course it was a mistake. Olivia wouldn't steal, especially not in such an easily traceable way. Then there was the job she left under murky circumstances, something about office politics, and a jealous supervisor who had sabotaged her work. She never provided details and I never pressed. Instead, I supported her financially during her 3-month job search, relieved when she found a position at the event planning company. Most telling, perhaps, were the boyfriends. Before Marcus, there had been a string of men, each relationship ending abruptly once Olivia had extracted what she needed: connections to internships, access to exclusive social circles, expensive gifts. The pattern was so consistent, it was almost clinical. Identify target, charm, extract value, discard. I had attributed this to her fear of abandonment, her difficulty trusting after Rebecca's desertion. "She's protecting herself," I told Harold, once after a particularly calculated breakup. "She leaves before she can be left." Harold hadn't been convinced. "There's strategy there, Elaine. It's not fear driving those decisions." I didn't want to believe him then. I couldn't bear to think that my granddaughter, the child I had poured my heart and soul into raising, could be so deliberately manipulative. But the evidence was becoming overwhelming. As I continued my timeline, more recent events took on sinister, new meanings. 6 months ago, Olivia had suddenly developed an interest in my health, asking detailed questions about my medications, suggesting supplements, researching doctors. "I just want you to be around for a long time, Grandma," she'd said when I expressed surprise at her new concern. 4 months ago, when the poisoning likely began, according to what I'd overheard, she started bringing water and tea during her visits, insisting I stay hydrated. Always watching me drink, always disposing of the glasses herself afterward. 3 months ago, she asked if I had updated my will since Harold's death, offering to help me find a good estate attorney. 2 months ago, she began mentioning my supposed memory lapses to neighbors, to my doctor, creating a false narrative of cognitive decline. "I'm worried about Grandma," I overheard her telling my next-door neighbor. She got confused about the day of her doctor's appointment, and I found the stove on twice last week. None of it had happened. But who would believe me over her? She was setting the stage, creating witnesses who would later nod sadly and say, "Yes, Elaine had been declining for some time." It's tragic, but not surprising that she had an accident. 1 month ago, she suggested the weekend trip to her lakeside cottage. "To get you some fresh air, Grandma." Each event, viewed through my new understanding, revealed itself as a carefully placed stepping stone leading to my planned demise. The realization was physically painful, like a hand squeezing my heart. I looked down at my timeline, now filled with 23 years of incidents ranging from childhood fibs to adult manipulation. 2, finally, attempted murder. The progression was clear, the escalation steady. What had begun as a child's opportunistic taking had evolved into a calculated scheme to eliminate the person who stood between Olivia and what she wanted. And what she wanted, it seemed, was everything I had. The most painful realization wasn't that Olivia was trying to kill me. It was that she had likely never loved me at all. Every "I love you, Grandma," every hug, every shared moment that I had treasured, all of it might have been performance, a means to an end. I set down my pen and closed my eyes, allowing myself one last moment of grief for the relationship I had believed in for so long. Then I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and turned to a fresh page. It was time to plan my response. My first instinct was to confront Olivia immediately, to demand answers, to expose her scheme in a moment of righteous anger. But decades as a paralegal had taught me the value of preparation, of gathering evidence before making accusations. More importantly, it had taught me that the most effective response isn't always the most emotionally satisfying one. If I confronted Olivia now, she would deny everything. She would turn my accusations back on me, use them as further evidence of my supposed mental decline. She might even accelerate her plans, finding a more immediate way to silence me. No, confrontation would have to wait. For now, I needed to secure my safety while continuing to gather evidence. And I needed to do it all while maintaining the illusion that I remained an oblivious, trusting grandmother. I began with practical measures. I purchased a small safe with a combination lock and installed it in my bedroom closet, hidden behind winter coats. Inside, I placed copies of all the evidence I had gathered so far, along with my passport, emergency cash, and a prepaid phone Barbara had helped me acquire. Next, I changed the locks on my house. I told the locksmith it was routine maintenance, but made sure to request a design that couldn't be easily copied. When Olivia inevitably asked for a new key, I would have one made, but it wouldn't be the only key. I could change the locks again before the weekend at the cottage. I installed simple security cameras, disguised as ordinary objects, a clock radio in the kitchen, a bookend in the living room, a digital picture frame in the hallway. If Olivia or her accomplice entered my home in my absence, I would have evidence. The most difficult and essential task was finding a way to avoid consuming anything Olivia prepared without raising her suspicions. I developed a series of small strategies, keeping a bottle of water with me that I would pretend to drink from while actually consuming nothing, excusing myself to the bathroom after accepting food or drinks, where I could dispose of them, complaining of a sensitive stomach that required me to eat only simple foods I prepared myself. None of these measures addressed the central problem, the lakeside cottage trip where Olivia intended to stage my accident. I could simply refuse to go, of course, but that would only delay the inevitable. Olivia would find another opportunity, another plan, and I would lose my chance to confront her with irrefutable evidence, to understand why my own granddaughter wanted me dead. No, I needed to go to the cottage, but I would be prepared in ways Olivia couldn't imagine. The day after creating my timeline, I called Dr. Wilson's office and requested a complete physical examination, including comprehensive blood work. "I haven't been feeling quite myself lately," I told the receptionist. "Fatigue, some confusion. I'm concerned." The appointment was scheduled for the following afternoon. I arrived 15 minutes early, a folder of notes in hand. Dr. Wilson had been my physician for over a decade, since Harold's first heart attack. He was thorough, compassionate, and, most importantly, had known me long enough to recognize that I was not prone to hypochondria or dramatic medical claims. "What seems to be the trouble, Elaine?" he asked as he entered the examination room. I took a deep breath. "I believe someone has been poisoning me," I said evenly. "Specifically with antifreeze." To his credit, Dr. Wilson didn't dismiss my claim outright. He raised his eyebrows, set down his clipboard, and gave me his full attention. That's a very serious accusation. What makes you think so? I handed him the laboratory results from the key, water samples along with a typed timeline of my symptoms over the past 4 months. Unexplained fatigue, occasional confusion, nausea, headaches. These are consistent with ethylene glycol poisoning, I said, especially when administered in small doses over time. Dr. Wilson reviewed the lab results carefully, his expression growing increasingly grave. This is disturbing, he said, finally. If accurate, these levels could indeed cause the symptoms you've described, potentially leading to kidney damage or failure if continued. I need 2 things from you, I said, my voice steady despite the surreal nature of the conversation. First, comprehensive tests to determine if there's been any organ damage. Second, documentation of the poisoning for legal purposes. He nodded slowly. We'll do a full workup. Blood, urine, kidney function tests. If what you're saying is true, there should be markers in your system. He hesitated, then asked the question I had been dreading. Elaine, who do you believe is doing this to you? I met his eyes directly. My granddaughter, Olivia. His expression registered shock, then doubt, then concern. Are you certain? Could there be another explanation? I wish there were, I said quietly, and proceeded to share the evidence I had gathered. The overheard conversation, the life insurance policy, the altered medications. By the time I finished, Dr. Wilson's initial skepticism had transformed into horrified belief. This needs to be reported to the police, he said firmly. It will be, I assured him, but not yet. I need to gather more evidence first, and I need to confront her myself. He frowned. That could be dangerous, Elaine. Which is why I need to be healthy and clear-headed, I replied. Please run the tests. Document everything. But keep it confidential for now. Dr. Wilson reluctantly agreed, on the condition that I would allow him to contact authorities immediately if my health appeared in imminent danger. The tests were extensive and would take several days for complete results, but preliminary findings confirmed what I already knew. I had been systematically poisoned for months. As I left the medical center, I felt a strange sense of validation mixed with profound sadness. There was something particularly devastating about having medical science confirm what my heart had been struggling to accept, that someone I loved was actively trying to kill me. The next item on my agenda was potentially the most difficult. I needed to contact the insurance company without alerting Olivia. If she had indeed taken out a policy on my life, I needed to know the details, the amount, the terms, and most importantly, whether there were any exclusions that might hint at her planned accident. Barbara had suggested a direct approach. Just call them, she said. You're the insured party. They'll have to tell you. But if Olivia had forged my signature or used some other deception, the company might contact her as the policy owner. I couldn't risk tipping my hand. Instead, I visited the local office of Jackson's Insurance in person, dressed differently than my usual style. A smart business suit instead of my typical casual attire, hair pulled back, makeup applied with a heavier hand than normal. I'm considering a life insurance policy, I told the agent who greeted me. But I have some concerns about whether I might already be insured through a family member's policy. My granddaughter recently mentioned something about it, but I'm afraid the details escape me. Would you be able to check your system? The agent looked sympathetic. Of course. What's your name and date of birth? I provided the information, watching carefully as she typed. Her expression shifted subtly as she viewed the screen. A slight widening of the eyes, a quick glance at me, then back to the monitor. Ah, yes, she said after a moment. It appears there is a policy. Quite a substantial one, in fact. It was taken out approximately 4 months ago. Exactly when my symptoms had begun. The timing was no coincidence. Would you be able to print The details for me? I asked casually. I'd like to avoid duplicating coverage. She hesitated. Normally, we would need the policy owner's permission. However, since you're the insured party, she seemed to make a decision. I'll print a summary. For you. It won't have all the details, but it should give you the basics. The summary she provided confirmed my worst fears. A $1.2 million policy with Olivia as the sole beneficiary. Death from accidental drowning was specifically covered with an additional payout clause. The policy had been taken out in my name, with what appeared to be my signature on the documents, a signature I had never provided. I thanked the agent and left with the summary folded carefully in my purse, another piece of evidence for my growing collection. The puzzle was becoming clearer, the picture it revealed increasingly disturbing. That evening, as I added the insurance documents to my safe, my phone rang. Olivia's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath, slipped back into the role of unsuspecting grandmother, and answered with a warmth I no longer felt. "Hi, sweetheart," I said cheerfully. "I was just thinking about our weekend trip." "Everything's set for this weekend," Olivia said, her voice bubbling with an enthusiasm that now sounded sinister rather than sweet. "Marcus is so excited to have you visit. He's even planning to grill that salmon you love." "That sounds lovely," I replied, matching her tone while my free hand clenched into a fist. "What should I bring?" "Just yourself," she said quickly. "And maybe those medications you've been taking. It's always good to have them with you, especially with your recent forgetfulness." I noted the deliberate pause, the careful insertion of my supposed cognitive decline into casual conversation. Another brick in the foundation she was building, to support the narrative of my accident. "Of course," I agreed mildly. "Is there anything else I should know about the weekend? Any special plans?" "Nothing elaborate. Some relaxation by the lake. Maybe a short hike if you're feeling up to it. The walking path has such beautiful views of the water." Views of the water. A walking path. A short hike. All innocent suggestions. If you weren't aware, they were reconnaissance for a murder location. "That sounds perfect," I said. "I could use some fresh air and exercise." After we hung up, I sat motionless for several minutes, processing the conversation. Olivia clearly intended to make her move this weekend. I had 3 days to finalize my preparations. The next morning, I visited my bank and emptied my safe deposit box. I needed all my evidence with me, not locked away where it would do no good if something went wrong. I also withdrew $5,000 in cash, enough to sustain me if I needed to leave town quickly after the confrontation. From the bank, I drove to an electronics store in a neighboring town where no one would recognize me. There, I purchased several small recording devices and an emergency GPS tracker, using cash for all transactions. The salesperson was helpful but not overly curious, assuming I was a concerned senior looking for safety devices. "The tracker is simple," he explained. "Just activate it here, and anyone with the companion app can locate you within a few feet. Great for hiking or if you're concerned about medical emergencies." "Exactly what I need," I agreed, thinking how ironic it was to be preparing for a medical emergency that my granddaughter was planning to orchestrate. My next stop was more difficult, emotionally, not logistically. I drove to the police station in town, where I asked to speak with Detective Morgan, an officer I knew slightly through Harold's volunteer work with the department's community outreach program. The detective was in her late 40s, with shrewd eyes and the composed demeanor of someone who had seen too much to be easily shocked. She listened without interruption as I outlined my situation, examining each piece of evidence I presented with methodical attention. "Mrs. Garcia," she said finally, "you've built a compelling case. We could pursue charges based on what you've already gathered. The poisoning alone is attempted murder." "But would it be enough for a conviction?" I asked. Her slight hesitation gave me my answer. "The evidence is circumstantial," she admitted. "Strong, but circumstantial. A good defense attorney would argue that the water samples could have been contaminated elsewhere, that the insurance policy was taken out with your knowledge, but you've forgotten due to cognitive issues. Exactly the narrative your granddaughter has been establishing. Which is why I need more, I said. Something irrefutable. A confession. Detective Morgan shook her head firmly. I cannot condone you putting yourself in danger to obtain a confession. The risk is too great. I'm already in danger, I pointed. Out. Every day I spend in Olivia's presence, I'm at risk. At least this way, the danger serves a purpose. We reached a compromise after nearly an hour of discussion. I would provide Detective Morgan with all my evidence, which she would document, officially but hold from formal processing. I would wear one of the recording devices during my weekend at the cottage, and, this was her non-negotiable condition, I would be under police surveillance the entire time. We'll have plainclothes officers in the vicinity, she explained. Not close enough to be noticed, but close enough to intervene if necessary. You'll have an emergency signal. Press this button 3 times and we'll respond immediately. She handed me a small device that resembled a key fob. And if I get what we need? I asked. Then we arrest her on the spot, Detective Morgan said, her expression grim. No second chances, no opportunity for her to harm you or flee. As I left the station, I felt a weight simultaneously lift from and settle onto my shoulders. I was no longer alone in this, which provided immense relief. But the reality of what I was undertaking, actively participating in a sting operation against my own granddaughter, struck me with fresh force. How had we arrived here? How had the child I raised become someone the police were preparing to? Arrest for attempted murder? I pushed the questions aside. There would be time for reflection later. For now, I needed to focus on the practical aspects of surviving the weekend and securing the evidence that would put Olivia away for a very long time. My final preparation involved a visit to Barbara, who had agreed to act as my emergency contact. Outside the police operation, if something went wrong, if the surveillance failed, if the recording devices malfunctioned, if Olivia somehow managed to outwit both me and the police, Barbara would ensure that the truth about my death would not remain hidden. Are you absolutely certain about this? Barbara asked as we sat in her sunroom, reviewing the details of my plan. You could still walk away, you know, move across the country, change your name, start over somewhere Olivia couldn't find you. I considered the suggestion seriously. It would certainly be easier, safer, but it would also mean Olivia would never face consequences for what she had done, and what she would likely do to someone else in the future. I can't, I said finally. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about justice. Barbara nodded, understanding, but not happy. Then at least promise me you'll be careful. That woman is not the girl you raised, Elaine. She's something else entirely. I know, I said quietly. I think I've always known, somewhere deep down. I just didn't want to see it. As I prepared to leave, Barbara handed me a sealed envelope. Don't open this unless things don't go as planned, she said. It's everything I know, everything you've told me. If something happens to you, I'll make sure everyone knows what Olivia did. I tucked the envelope into my purse, oddly comforted by this macabre insurance policy. Even if Olivia succeeded in killing me, she wouldn't escape the consequences. The day before the trip, I made my final preparations. I packed a small overnight bag with essentials, hiding the recording devices among my toiletries and in the lining of my cardigan. I activated the GPS tracker and confirmed that Detective Morgan could access the signal from her phone. I arranged for my neighbor, Mrs. Kravitz, to collect my mail and water my plants. Not because I expected to be gone long, but because maintaining normal routines was important. If Olivia checked with the neighbors afterward, everything would appear ordinary. That evening, I recorded a video message on my computer, detailing everything I knew about Olivia's plan and including copies of all the evidence I had gathered. I encrypted the file and set it to automatically send to Detective Morgan, Barbara, and my attorney if I didn't enter a specific code within 48 hours. As darkness fell, I sat in my living room looking at old photographs. Not of Olivia this time, but of Harold. My husband's kind eyes seemed to look back at me with concern and love. "I'm being careful," I told his image, "but I need to do this. I need to know why." In the quiet of that moment, I realized that beyond justice, beyond safety, what I sought most was understanding. How had the child we had loved so completely become capable of such calculated evil? Was it something in her nature that we had failed to recognize? Something in her nurturing that we had gotten terribly wrong? Or was it simply the random cruelty of fate, creating a void in a human heart that no amount of love could fill? I didn't know if confronting Olivia would provide those answers, but I had to try. The next morning, I rechecked all my recording devices, confirmed the GPS tracker was operational, and called Detective Morgan to verify the surveillance plan. Everything was in place. Then I sat by the window, overnight bag at my feet, and waited for Olivia to arrive. Olivia arrived precisely at 10 o'clock, her sleek silver car pulling into my driveway with a soft purr of expensive engineering. I watched through the window as she checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, practiced a smile, then exited the vehicle with the fluid grace she had perfected since adolescence. I opened the door before she could knock, greeting her with a smile that matched her own in insincerity. "Right on time," I said cheerfully. "I'm all packed and ready." Olivia stepped inside, eyes quickly scanning the entryway, the living room beyond, assessing everything with that calculating gaze I now recognized all too well. "Great. Marcus is already at the cottage setting things up." She reached for my overnight bag. "Let me take that for you." I maintained my grip on the handle. "It's fine, dear. It's quite light." A flicker of annoyance crossed her features before she covered it with concern. "Grandma, you shouldn't strain yourself. The doctor said to be careful with your blood pressure." The irony of her expressing concern about my health while actively trying to destroy it was almost enough to break my composure. Instead, I relaxed my grip on the bag, allowing her to take it, but not before confirming with a subtle pat that the recording device sewn into the lining was still in place. "You're right," I conceded. "Thank you, sweetheart." In the car, Olivia chattered about wedding plans, about Marcus's recent promotion, about the cottage renovations. I responded with appropriate interest, asking questions, commenting on details, playing the role of the engaged, slightly forgetful grandmother she expected me to be. "The insurance agent called yesterday," she mentioned casually as we turned onto the highway, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "About that policy we discussed. Everything's been approved." We had never discussed any insurance policy. This was a test, I realized. A probe to see if I remembered something that had never happened, or if I would contradict her and demonstrate more mental acuity than she wanted me to have. "Oh, that's good," I said vaguely. "I'm glad it's all taken care of." She nodded, seemingly satisfied with my ambiguous response. "The coverage is excellent. Very comprehensive." "That's important at my age," I agreed, noting how her hands relaxed, slightly on the steering wheel. She believed I was completely in the dark, exactly where she wanted me. We drove for nearly an hour, the landscape gradually transforming from suburban developments to rolling countryside, and finally to the more rugged terrain surrounding the lake. Olivia had purchased the cottage 18 months ago, describing it as an investment property that she and Marcus occasionally used for weekends away. I had visited only once before, shortly after they acquired it. As we turned onto the narrow road leading to the lake, I activated the emergency GPS tracker in my pocket, confirming with a quick glance at my phone that Detective Morgan was receiving the signal. According to our plan, the police surveillance team would maintain a discreet distance, monitoring but not approaching unless the situation became dangerous. The cottage appeared around a bend, A charming two-story structure with a wide deck overlooking the water, more substantial than the typical lakeside cabin. Marcus's dark blue SUV was parked in the gravel driveway. "Home sweet home for the weekend," Olivia announced as she pulled up beside Marcus's vehicle. "Look, Grandma, isn't the view spectacular?" It was indeed beautiful. The lake stretched before us, its surface glittering in the midday sun, surrounded by dense woods that climbed the surrounding hills. The nearest neighboring cottage was barely visible through the trees, at least a quarter-mile away. Perfect isolation for an accident to occur. Marcus emerged from the cottage as we arrived, his handsome face arranged in a welcoming smile. He was tall and athletic, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to success. I had always liked him, found him more genuine than many of Olivia's previous boyfriends. Now I wondered how much he knew about Olivia's plans, whether he was an active participant or merely an unwitting accessory. "Elaine, so glad you could join us this weekend," he called, descending the steps to help with my bag. "The weather forecast is perfect." "Thank you for having me," I replied, studying his expression for signs of duplicity. There was something in his eyes, not quite guilt, but a certain uneasiness that made me suspect he wasn't entirely ignorant of what Olivia intended. Inside, the cottage was even more impressive than I remembered. Hardwood floors, stone fireplace, expansive windows showcasing the lake view. The furnishings were expensive but tasteful, far beyond what Olivia and Marcus should have been able to afford on their combined salaries. "You've done more renovations," I observed, running my hand along a new granite countertop in the kitchen. "It's beautiful." "We've been investing in quality upgrades," Olivia explained, exchanging a quick glance with Marcus. "The property value has already increased significantly." I nodded, mentally calculating the cost of the improvements I could see. The granite alone would have been several $1,000s. Add the new hardwood floors, the updated bathrooms, the designer furniture. The total would easily exceed $100,000. Where had that money come from? "Let me show you to your room," Olivia said, leading me up a narrow staircase to the second floor. "We've put you in the Lakeview bedroom. I think you'll be comfortable there." The bedroom was lovely, with a queen-sized bed positioned to provide a panoramic view of the water. A private bathroom adjoined it, recently renovated with marble tile and a large walk-in shower. "The shower can be a bit tricky," Olivia mentioned, demonstrating the controls. "The floor gets quite slippery when wet, so be careful. We've been meaning to add safety rails." I noted the emphasis on the slippery floor, the absence of safety features. Another piece of groundwork being laid for my accident. "I'll be careful," I promised, wondering if the bathroom was where she planned to stage my fall. It would be a feasible scenario: an elderly woman slipping in the shower, hitting her head, drowning in just a few inches of water. Tragic, but not suspicious. "Great. I'll let you get settled," Olivia said. "Lunch will be ready in about 20 minutes. Come down whenever you're ready." Alone in the room, I immediately conducted a thorough inspection. I checked the bathroom for any signs of tampering, loosened fixtures, damaged flooring, anything that might be designed to cause a fall. Finding nothing obvious, I turned my attention to the bed, the windows, the closet. In the bedside table drawer, I found what appeared to be a normal bottle of sleeping pills. The label indicated they were an over-the-counter brand, but when I opened the cap and examined the tablets inside, they didn't match the manufacturer's typical design. They were slightly larger, with a different imprint code. I carefully photographed the bottle and its contents with my phone, then replaced it exactly as I had found it. Whether these were simply stronger sleeping medication or something more sinister, I had no intention of taking them. Next, I placed one of my recording devices on the underside of the bedside table, positioning it to capture any conversations in the room. I put another in the bathroom, wedged behind the vanity. As I unpacked my clothes, I heard voices from downstairs, Olivia, and Marcus speaking in hushed but intense tones. I couldn't make out the words, but the cadence suggested an argument or disagreement. Curious, I silently approached the staircase, positioning myself where I could hear without being seen. "Not what we agreed," Marcus was saying, his voice tight with tension. "You said it would look natural. This is something else entirely." "Lower your voice," Olivia hissed. "It will look natural. The dosage is calculated precisely." "Calculated by who? That guy you met at the bar? We don't even know if he's actually a pharmacist." "He knows what he's doing," Olivia insisted. "The pills will make her drowsy, disoriented. She'll go to the bathroom in the night, slip, and that's it. Clean, simple, untraceable." "And if it doesn't work? If she doesn't take the pills? Or if she doesn't fall?" There was a pause, then Olivia's voice, colder than I had ever heard it. "Then we move to Plan B, the hiking trail tomorrow. One push. Near the cliff edge and it's over. Either way, it happens this weekend." "Jesus, Liv!" Marcus's voice was shaking. "This is your grandmother we're talking about." "This is $1.2 million we're talking about," Olivia corrected him sharply. "Plus the house, the investments, everything. Are you in or out?" Another pause, longer this time. Then, defeated. "I'm in. But I don't like it." "You don't have to like it. You just have to not interfere." I retreated silently to my room, my heart pounding. The conversation had confirmed my worst fears while revealing new, disturbing details. Olivia wasn't working alone. Marcus was at least aware of the plan, if reluctantly complicit. And she had a backup strategy if the bathroom accident failed. Most chillingly, she had consulted someone with pharmacological knowledge, obtaining drugs specifically designed to impair my coordination and awareness. This wasn't just opportunistic exploitation of an elderly relative's vulnerability. This was premeditated murder, planned with clinical precision. I checked my phone, confirming that my earlier text to Detective Morgan had gone through. The police were in position, monitoring the cottage from a distance. I was wearing multiple recording devices, and the conversation I had just overheard was almost certainly captured by at least one of them. I had what I needed. I could signal the police now, have them raid the cottage, arrest Olivia and Marcus, on the spot. The evidence was compelling. The drugged pills, the recorded conversation discussing murder plans, the insurance policy. It might be enough for a conviction. But something held me back. Perhaps it was the paralegal in me, wanting an airtight case. Perhaps it was the grandmother, still struggling to reconcile the child I had raised with the monster she had become. Or perhaps it was simply that I needed to look Olivia in the eyes when she realized her plan had failed, when she understood that I had been a step ahead of her all along. Whatever the reason, I decided to wait. To continue the charade for a few more hours to gather more evidence, to force a more explicit confession. It was a risk, but a calculated one. The police were nearby. I was alert and aware of the danger. And most importantly, Olivia still believed I was oblivious, which gave me the advantage. I took a deep breath, composed my expression into one of mild contentment, and descended the stairs to join my would-be murderers for lunch. Lunch was a masterclass in deception, not Olivia's, but my own. I played the role of the slightly confused but delighted grandmother, exclaiming over the grilled salmon Marcus had prepared, commenting on the beautiful view, asking innocent questions about their wedding plans. "The venue deposit is due next month," Olivia mentioned, refilling my water glass with practiced solicitude. "It's quite substantial." "Weddings are expensive these days," I agreed, noticing how she watched intently as I sipped the water. I had already decided that anything I consumed in their presence would be minimal. A small bite here, a careful sip there. Nothing that could be laced with enough of whatever they might be using to affect me significantly. "We're trying to keep costs reasonable," Marcus added, his discomfort evident in the way he avoided meeting my eyes. "But quality comes at a price. Speaking of which," Olivia segued smoothly. I was wondering if you'd given any more thought to that cash gift you mentioned? The one Grandpa Harold set aside? Ah, the non-existent cash. My fabricated bait. I had been waiting for her to raise the subject again. Yes, of course, I said, setting down my fork as if the question had just reminded me. I've been meaning to show you where it's hidden. After lunch, perhaps? Olivia's eyes lit up with naked greed, quickly concealed behind a mask of casual interest. Only if you're comfortable sharing that, Grandma. It's your money, after all. Nonsense, I waved dismissively. What would I do with it at my age? It should go to you and Marcus, help you start your life together properly. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair but said nothing. I wondered how much of this aspect of Olivia's plan he knew about. Whether he was aware that the cash was a fiction designed to ensure my presence at the cottage, or if he believed, as Olivia seemingly did, that there was actual money to be had. After lunch, I insisted on helping with the dishes despite Olivia's protests. You cooked? I'll clean, I said firmly. It's only fair. This wasn't mere politeness. I wanted an opportunity to observe them together, to see how they interacted, when they thought I wasn't paying close attention. As I rinsed plates at the sink, positioned to see their reflections in the window, I watched Olivia and Marcus exchange tense whispers on the deck. Their body language told me everything their muffled words couldn't. Marcus was agitated, repeatedly, running his hand through his hair, a nervous habit I'd noticed before. Olivia was coldly determined, her posture rigid, one finger occasionally jabbing toward the house, toward me, to emphasize whatever point she was making. Eventually, Marcus threw up his hands in apparent surrender and walked away, down the steps, toward the lakeshore. Olivia watched him go, her expression a mixture of irritation and calculation, before composing her features and returning inside. Marcus is setting up the paddle boat for tomorrow, she explained with a practiced smile. I thought we might take a short ride on the lake if the weather holds. A boat ride. Another potential accident scenario to add to the bathroom fall and the hiking trail. Olivia was creating multiple opportunities, multiple possibilities. She was nothing if not thorough. That sounds lovely, I said, drying my hands on a dish towel. Now, about that money. Her attention immediately snapped into sharp focus, her earlier irritation with Marcus forgotten. Yes, you mentioned you'd show me where it's hidden? I nodded, lowering my voice conspiratorially. It's not here, of course. It's back at the house. But I can tell you exactly where to find it. A flash of disappointment crossed her face, quickly replaced by eager interest. Where? Is it somewhere I would know? It's in the attic, I said, inventing details on the spot. Behind the false wall Harold installed when we renovated. You wouldn't have noticed it unless you knew what to look for. False wall? Olivia repeated, hanging on my every word. I nodded solemnly. Harold was always concerned about security. He built a hidden compartment behind the water heater in the attic. The cash is in a metal box inside. $90,000, just as I told you. Olivia's pupils dilated slightly at the amount, her breathing quickening. I could almost see her recalculating her plans, adding this unexpected windfall to the insurance money and inheritance she anticipated. That's incredible, Grandma. I had no idea. Few people did, I said with a small smile. That was the point. Throughout the afternoon, I continued to build my own strategic plan while appearing to fall right into Olivia's. When she suggested a walk down to the lake to enjoy the fresh air, I agreed enthusiastically, knowing she was likely scouting locations for tomorrow's hiking accident. When she pointed out particularly scenic spots along the water's edge, all featuring steep drops or slippery rocks, I expressed appropriate admiration while mentally noting each location as a potential crime scene. The trail up to the overlook is beautiful, she mentioned, gesturing toward a narrow path that wound up the hillside behind the cottage. The view of the lake from up there is spectacular. We should hike up tomorrow morning. I'd like that, I said, though we both knew that if her primary plan succeeded, I wouldn't live to see the morning. By late afternoon, I had mapped out the cottage and surrounding area in my mind, identifying all the locations Olivia had subtly highlighted as potential accident sites. I had also constructed a detailed timeline of how I expected the evening to unfold, based on the conversations I'd overheard, and Olivia's increasingly transparent attempts to ensure I would be appropriately positioned for her plan. The strategy crystallized as I watched Olivia prepare dinner, ostentatiously checking that the path from my bedroom to the bathroom was clear of any obstacles. "We wouldn't want you tripping in the dark if you need to get up during the night," she explained, her concern so convincing it would have been persuasive if I hadn't known better. My plan was simple, but, I believed, effective. I would pretend to take the drugged sleeping pills before bed, then feign the expected symptoms: drowsiness, disorientation, impaired coordination. I would create an opportunity for Olivia to implement her bathroom accident scenario, but with a crucial difference. I would be fully alert and prepared to confront her at the critical moment. The recording devices were in place. The police were nearby, monitoring the situation. All the evidence I had gathered was securely backed up and would be automatically sent to multiple recipients if I didn't check in by morning. But there was one additional element I needed to implement, a safeguard I hadn't shared with Detective Morgan or Barbara, something that would ensure Olivia couldn't simply deny everything when confronted. I needed her to believe she had succeeded, if only briefly. I needed her to reveal her true self in the moment of apparent victory. During a brief period alone in my room before dinner, I sent a carefully worded text to Detective Morgan, updating her on what I had learned and outlining my revised plan for the evening. Her response was immediate and emphatic. "Too risky. We should move in now." I understood her concern, but I also knew that a premature intervention might not provide the definitive evidence we needed. I texted back, "Trust me, I can handle this. Be ready at my signal, not before." After a moment's hesitation, she replied simply, "Be careful. Signal at first sign of danger." With dinner approaching, I made my final preparations. I switched on all recording devices, confirming they were functioning properly. I positioned the emergency signal device within easy reach in my cardigan pocket. I reviewed the layout of the cottage one more time, mentally rehearsing how I would respond to various scenarios. As I prepared to go downstairs, I paused before the bedroom mirror, studying my reflection. The woman looking back at me was not the trusting grandmother who had spent decades making excuses for Olivia's behavior. She was someone stronger, clearer-eyed, determined to face the truth no matter how painful. "You can do this," I told my reflection quietly. "For yourself. For justice. For the girl she might have been." Then I straightened my shoulders, arranged my features into an expression of mild contentment, and went down to dinner with the granddaughter who planned to kill me before morning. Dinner was a performance worthy of professional actors, all three of us playing our assigned roles with convincing precision. Marcus served roasted chicken with vegetables, a hearty, homey meal designed to create an atmosphere of comfortable normality. Olivia poured wine, insisting I have just a small glass. "To help you sleep," I accepted, but managed to consume only a few token sips when she wasn't watching. The conversation remained superficially pleasant, touching on neighborhood gossip, upcoming holidays, and innocuous memories of past family gatherings. Yet, beneath this veneer of normalcy, currents of tension flowed. Marcus avoided extended eye contact, focusing intently on his food. Olivia maintained her solicitous granddaughter act, but I caught the occasional glance between her and Marcus, quick, loaded exchanges that confirmed their shared secret. "Remember that Christmas when Grandpa Harold dressed as Santa?" Olivia asked, her voice warm with false nostalgia. "You were so surprised when he came down the chimney." I smiled at the fabricated memory. Harold had never once dressed as Santa, and our house didn't even have a functional chimney. It was a small but telling slip, Olivia creating a shared history that had never existed, perhaps to ease her own conscience about what she planned to do. Yes, I lied in return. Harold always did love Christmas. That much at least was true. My husband had delighted in the holidays, particularly after Olivia came to live with us. I wondered briefly what he would think of her now, of what she had become. The thought brought a genuine sadness that I didn't need to hide. As the meal progressed, I began a subtle performance of my own. I allowed my hand to tremble slightly when lifting my water glass. I paused occasionally mid-sentence, as if losing my train of thought. I rubbed my temples once or twice, suggesting the onset of a headache. Olivia noticed immediately, her attention sharpening. "Are you feeling all right, Grandma? You look tired." "Just a little headache," I admitted. "Nothing serious." "You should take something for that," she suggested promptly. "I have some pain relievers upstairs." "I brought my own medications," I said. "But thank you, dear." After dinner, Marcus built a fire in the stone fireplace while Olivia prepared coffee and dessert. A rich chocolate cake that I complimented but barely tasted. We sat in the living room, the flames casting dancing shadows across the wood-paneled walls, creating an atmosphere that would have been cozy under different circumstances. "This reminds me of those camping trips we used to take," I said, deliberately introducing another false memory. "Remember roasting marshmallows by the lake?" We had never gone camping together, not once. Olivia had always refused, claiming she hated insects and sleeping outdoors. But she nodded enthusiastically, building on the fictional reminiscence. "Those were the best trips," she agreed. "You taught me how to fish on one of those vacations." Marcus glanced between us, a slight frown creasing his forehead. Perhaps he knew enough about Olivia's actual childhood to recognize the fabrication, or perhaps he was simply uncomfortable with the web of lies surrounding the evening. By 9:00, I had established the foundation for what would come next. Through careful physical cues and deliberate verbal slips, I had created the impression of someone increasingly fatigued, slightly confused, and ready for rest. The stage was set for the next phase of both our plans. "I think I'll turn in early," I announced, stifling a manufactured yawn. "It's been a long day." Olivia immediately stood. "Let me help you upstairs." "I can manage," I assured her, but allowed her to take my arm as we ascended the narrow staircase. Her grip was firm, supportive, and perfectly positioned to control my movement if necessary. I noted how she carefully assessed each step, perhaps already imagining how my accident would occur. In my bedroom, Olivia hovered as I retrieved my toiletry bag. "Do you need anything before bed? Water? Tea?" "Just water, please," I said, watching as she filled a glass from the bathroom tap. She set it on the bedside table, next to the lamp. "Don't forget your medications," she reminded me, her voice gentle, but insistent. I nodded, opening my pill organizer and pretending to remove several tablets. "I'll take them right after I change." Olivia's eyes flicked to the bedside drawer where the doctored sleeping pills waited. "I noticed you seem to be having trouble sleeping lately. I put some over-the-counter sleep aids in the drawer there, if you need them." "How thoughtful," I murmured. "I might try one." She lingered, clearly reluctant to leave until she saw me take the pills. I needed her gone, if only briefly, to prepare for what came next. "Could you check if I left my reading glasses downstairs?" I asked. "I thought they were in my purse, but I can't seem to find them." "Of course," she agreed, heading for the door. "I'll be right back." The moment she left, I moved quickly and purposefully. I removed the doctored pills from the drawer, replaced them with identical-looking but harmless vitamins from my toiletry bag, then returned the bottle to its original position. I checked the recording devices one final time, confirming they were still functioning. I positioned the emergency signal in my pocket, where I could access it instantly if needed. Most importantly, I sent a brief text to Detective Morgan. Proceeding. As planned. Expect developments within 2-3 hours. Her response was immediate. Officers in position. Signal at first sign of trouble. I had just slipped my phone under the pillow when Olivia returned, my reading glasses in hand. Found them on the coffee table, she said. Thank you, dear. I accepted the glasses, setting them beside the water glass. Olivia gestured to the bedside drawer. Don't forget those sleep aids if you need them. One should be enough to help you drift off. I'll probably take one, I agreed. Now you should get some rest yourself. We have that hike planned for tomorrow. She nodded, then surprised me by leaning down to kiss my cheek, a gesture so reminiscent of the little girl she had once been that it sent a sharp pang through my heart. Good night, Grandma. Sleep well. Good night, Olivia. After she left, I changed into night clothes, performed my usual bedtime routine, and turned off the main light, leaving only the bedside lamp illuminating the room. Then I waited, sitting on the edge of the bed, fully alert despite my apparent preparations for sleep. I knew Olivia wouldn't make her move immediately. She would wait until she believed the drugged pills had taken effect, until the house was quiet and still. This gave me time for final mental preparations, reviewing what I knew, what I suspected, and how I would respond when the moment came. Through the floor, I could hear muffled voices, Olivia and Marcus speaking in the living room below. Though I couldn't make out the words, the cadence suggested tension, perhaps argument. After about 20 minutes, the voices fell silent, replaced by the soft sounds of movement, footsteps, the opening and closing of doors. The cottage settled into nighttime stillness. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, drops pattering against the window like tiny fingers tapping the glass. The sound was oddly soothing, a natural counterpoint to the unnatural drama about to unfold. I dimmed the bedside lamp further, but didn't extinguish it completely. I arranged the pillows to suggest a sleeping form, then positioned myself in the bathroom doorway, hidden from immediate view of anyone entering the bedroom, but with clear sightlines to both the bed and the door. And then I waited, as still, and patient as a hunter in a blind. Time passed with excruciating slowness. The rain continued its gentle percussion against the windows. Occasionally, the old cottage would creak and settle, sounds that might have been unsettling under different circumstances, but now served as background noise to mask my movements. At precisely 11:47 p.m., according to the glowing numbers on my watch, I heard it, the soft, deliberate tread of footsteps on the stairs. Olivia was coming. My hand tightened around the emergency signal in my pocket, but I didn't activate it. Not yet. I needed more than just her presence in my room. I needed intent, action, confession. The door to my bedroom opened slowly, silently, a slice of darkness widening as Olivia eased it inward. From my position in the bathroom doorway, I could see her silhouette pause at the threshold, listening, watching the seemingly sleeping form on the bed. After a moment's hesitation, she entered the room, moving with practiced stealth across the hardwood floor. She approached the bed, leaning over to study what she believed was my sleeping face. "Grandma?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rain. "Are you awake?" When no response came from the pillows, she straightened, satisfaction evident in her posture. She turned toward the bathroom, toward me, and in that moment, I knew it was time. I stepped forward into the dim light, fully alert, my eyes meeting hers directly. "Hello, Olivia," I said calmly. "Looking for something?" Olivia froze, her body tensing like a startled deer. For a brief, unguarded moment, naked shock transformed her features, eyes widening, mouth falling slightly open. Then, with remarkable speed, she composed herself, sliding back into the role of concerned granddaughter. "Grandma, you scared me," she laughed. the sound brittle in the quiet room. "I was just checking on you. I heard noises and wanted to make sure you were okay." I didn't move from my position in the bathroom doorway. "There were no noises, Olivia. And you didn't answer my question. What are you looking for?" Her eyes darted around the room, perhaps searching for signs that I had contacted anyone, that I wasn't alone in my suspicions. Finding nothing obvious, she doubled down on her performance. "I don't know what you mean. It's after midnight. I was worried when I heard movement. The sleeping pill should have—" She caught herself, but not quickly enough. "Should have what?" I pressed, taking a step toward her. "Knocked me unconscious? Made me disoriented enough to have an accident in the bathroom? That was the plan, wasn't it?" Color drained from her face, but she maintained her denial. "Grandma, you're not making sense. Maybe you're having one of your episodes. Let me help you back to bed." She moved toward me, hands outstretched in a gesture meant to appear supportive, but that I now recognized as controlling. I stepped back, maintaining the distance between us. "I'm not having an episode, Olivia. I'm perfectly lucid. In fact, I haven't been this clear-headed in months. Not since you started poisoning my water." That stopped her. Her hands dropped to her sides, her expression flickering between continued pretense and the first hints of calculation. She was reassessing, trying to determine how much I knew, how much I could prove. "Poisoning?" she repeated, infusing her voice with hurt confusion. "That's a terrible thing to say. Why would I ever do something like that?" "For the money," I said simply. "The life insurance policy you took out on me 4 months ago. The inheritance you'd receive. The house you've been so interested in having me sign over." She flinched just slightly at the mention of the insurance policy. A tell. But she wasn't ready to abandon the act entirely. "Insurance policy? I don't know what you're talking about." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Grandma, I'm really worried about you. You've been forgetting things, imagining things. Dr. Wilson mentioned the possibility of dementia. Dr. Wilson confirmed I've been systematically poisoned with ethylene glycol," I interrupted, my voice steady. "Antifreeze, Olivia. Added to my water, my tea, gradually over months. Designed to damage my kidneys and create symptoms that might be mistaken for cognitive decline." Her expression hardened, the pretense of concern falling away by degrees. "You can't prove that." "I have the lab results," I replied calmly. "From multiple water samples you served me. I have the altered medications you replaced in my pill organizer. And—" I gestured to the room around us. "I have recordings of you and Marcus discussing your plans to stage my accident here this weekend." Something shifted in her eyes then. A coldness. A calculation that reminded me of a predator reassessing its approach. "No one would believe you," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. A confused old woman with possible dementia making wild accusations against her devoted granddaughter? Who raised her when her mother abandoned her? Who has been caring for her as she ages? She smiled thinly. "It would sound like paranoid delusions." "Perhaps," I acknowledged, "if it were just my word against yours. But it isn't." I reached slowly into my pocket and withdrew my phone, holding it where she could see the screen. The recording app was active, documenting every word of our current conversation. "This is just one of several devices recording tonight's events," I informed her. "The others are hidden throughout this room and the cottage. They've captured everything. Your conversations with Marcus about the drugged sleeping pills, your plans for the hiking accident tomorrow if the bathroom scenario failed, everything!" Olivia stared at the phone, her face a battleground of emotions, shock, fury, fear, calculation, before settling into something harder, colder. "Give me that," she demanded, lunging forward to grab the phone. I stepped back quickly, maintaining my distance. "It wouldn't matter if you took it. The recordings are automatically uploaded to secure cloud storage. And the police already have copies of everything I've gathered so far." "Police?" For the first time, real alarm broke through her composure. They're nearby, monitoring the situation, I confirmed. Detective Morgan has been quite helpful in building the case against you. Olivia's eyes darted to the windows, as if expecting to see police lights outside. Finding nothing, she seemed to make a decision. Her posture shifted subtly from defensive to aggressive. "You're bluffing," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "There are no police. There never were. You're alone here, just like you've always been alone. That's why it was so easy." The naked contempt in her voice was startling in its intensity. This was Olivia with the mask completely removed, the true face beneath the years of performance. "What? Was easy?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Manipulating you," she said with casual cruelty. "Making you believe I cared. That anyone cared. You were so desperate for love, so pathetically grateful for any crumb of affection, it made you blind. Stupid." Each word struck like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. This was what I needed. The unvarnished truth, recorded for evidence. "So it was all an act?" I asked, keeping her talking. "From the beginning?" She laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. "Not at the beginning. At first you were just convenient, a place to live when Rebecca dumped me. But then I realized how useful you could be. How your desperation to be loved made you an endless resource to be tapped. And Harold? Did you manipulate him too?" Something flickered across her face at the mention of my husband, a brief, complex emotion I couldn't quite identify. "Harold was different," she admitted after a moment. "He saw through me sometimes. It's why I had to work harder with him, be more careful." I nodded, pieces falling into place. Harold's occasional concerns about Olivia's behavior, his gentle suggestions that she might need more structured guidance, observations I had dismissed as overly strict. "When did you decide to kill me?" I asked directly. The bluntness of the question seemed to please her, as if she appreciated finally dropping all pretense. "After Marcus and I found the cottage," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the window, toward the lake beyond. "We wanted to renovate, make it really spectacular, the kind of place that makes a statement. But contractors are expensive, and quality materials even more so." She shrugged, as if discussing nothing more significant than a shopping list. "We needed money. A lot of it. Your money. So you took out the life insurance policy." She nodded. "It wasn't hard. Your signature is simple to forge, and the agent barely glanced at the paperwork. Old people die all the time. No one questions it. Too closely. And the antifreeze? That was elegant, don't you think?" A note of pride entered her voice. Gradual, nearly impossible to detect unless someone is specifically looking for it. Creates symptoms that mimic natural deterioration in the elderly. I've been researching it for nearly a year. The casual way she discussed her methodical attempts to murder me was chilling. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. It was calculated, researched, planned with the same attention to detail one might bring to a business venture or home renovation. "You could have just waited," I pointed out. "I'm 74. You would have inherited eventually." Olivia rolled, her eyes, impatient with what she clearly considered a naive suggestion. "Eventually isn't good enough. Marcus and I have plans, a lifestyle to maintain. The cottage renovations couldn't wait. The wedding venue needed deposits. Why should we put our lives on hold for years when there was a simpler solution?" "Killing me. Accelerating the inevitable," she corrected, as if the euphemism somehow mitigated the horror of what she had planned. "You've lived your life, Grandma. Had your time. It's our turn now." The complete absence of remorse, of basic human empathy, was stunning. I had prepared myself for Olivia's betrayal, for her greed, even for her capacity for violence. But the utter vacancy where love, or even simple human connection, should have been left me momentarily speechless. In that silence, Olivia seemed to recalculate her position. Her eyes narrowed thoughtfully as she glanced from me to the door and back again. "It doesn't matter what you've recorded," she said finally. "You're not leaving this cottage alive. And without you to testify, any recordings will be circumstantial at best. They can be explained away. Dark humor, misunderstood conversations, hypothetical scenarios discussed after too much wine." She took a step toward me, her intention clear in the sudden tension of her body. "No one will question an elderly woman having an accident in a lakeside cottage, especially one with documented cognitive issues and a history of unsteadiness." I held my ground, watching her advance with a calmness that seemed to unnerve her slightly. "You seem very confident for someone who's just confessed to attempted murder on multiple recordings," I observed. "Because I know something you don't," she replied, a cold smile spreading across her face. "Marcus isn't the only one here with me tonight. My friend, the one who helped with the medications, he's downstairs right now. And unlike Marcus, he has no qualms about getting his hands dirty." As if on cue, I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs, deliberate, unhurried, the tread of someone who felt no need to conceal their presence. Olivia's smile widened, triumphant. "You shouldn't have tried to outsmart me, Grandma. You're simply not equipped for it." I maintained eye contact with her, my expression unchanged even as my hand moved to my pocket, to the emergency signal device. "That's where you're wrong, Olivia," I said quietly. "I've been outsmarting you from the beginning." I pressed the button 3 times in rapid succession, and the world erupted into motion. The cottage exploded into activity. Floodlights suddenly illuminated the windows from outside, bathing the room in harsh white light. The front door crashed, opened downstairs, followed by the unmistakable sound of multiple footsteps and authoritative voices shouting, "Police! Don't move!" Olivia's triumphant expression collapsed into shock, then fear. "What?" "As I said," I told her calmly, "the police have been monitoring us. Detective Morgan and her team have heard every word of your confession." A cry of surprise echoed from downstairs, followed by the clatter of something or someone falling. Male voices raised in protest, commands being issued by the officers. Olivia's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal's, searching for escape. Finding none, she turned back to me, her features contorting with fury. "You planned this," she hissed, taking a step toward me. "You set me up." I revealed the truth. I corrected her. "You did the rest yourself." For a moment, I thought she might lunge at me despite the chaos unfolding below us. Her hands had curled into claws, her body coiled with potential violence. I tightened my grip on the emergency signal, ready to press it again if necessary. But before Olivia could act, heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs. Detective Morgan appeared in the doorway, weapon drawn, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. "Elaine Garcia?" she called, her eyes quickly assessing the situation. "I'm fine," I assured her, relief washing through me at the sight of her professional, composed presence. My granddaughter was just explaining her murder plans in considerable detail. Olivia's fury transformed instantly into wounded innocence. "That's absurd," she protested, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "Grandma is confused. She's been having episodes, delusions. Her doctor can confirm it." Detective Morgan's expression remained impassive. "Ms. Dawson, we've been monitoring this cottage for hours. We have audio recordings of your entire conversation, as well as your earlier discussions with Mr. Hargrove about drugging your grandmother." "That's not," Olivia began, but the detective cut her off. "We also have evidence of the ethylene glycol, poisoning from Ms. Garcia's medical tests, the tampered medication in your possession, and documentation of the fraudulently obtained life insurance policy." Each piece of evidence landed like a physical blow, causing Olivia to flinch slightly. But she wasn't ready to surrender just yet. "This is all a misunderstanding," she insisted, her tone shifting to something softer, more reasonable. "Grandma, has been struggling with paranoia. We've been trying to help her, but she twists everything. Ask Marcus. He'll explain. Mr. Hargrove is currently being questioned downstairs, Detective Morgan informed her. As is your associate, Mr. Lawrence, who has an outstanding warrant for pharmaceutical theft in 2 counties. At the mention of her accomplice, something in Olivia's composure finally cracked. Her shoulders slumped slightly, the first sign of defeat. Olivia Dawson, Detective Morgan continued, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. As the detective recited the Miranda rights, one of the uniformed officers moved forward with handcuffs. Olivia's gaze locked with mine as her hands were secured behind her back. A look of such pure hatred that it momentarily stole my breath. You'll regret this, she said, her voice low enough that perhaps only I could hear it. One day, when you're alone and forgotten in some nursing home, you'll wish you'd just taken the pills. I held her gaze steadily. I would rather die knowing the truth than live surrounded by beautiful lies, Olivia. Something flickered in her eyes, not remorse, but perhaps a grudging recognition that she had underestimated me. Then the officers led her away, her rigid back and raised chin displaying a pride that even arrest couldn't completely diminish. When she was gone, I sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly aware of the tremendous strain the evening had placed on me. Detective Morgan approached, holstering her weapon. Are you all right, Ms. Garcia? She asked, genuine concern in her voice. I will be, I said, finding that I meant it. What about Marcus and the other man? Lawrence, was it? Both in custody. Mr. Hargrove is claiming he was coerced, that he didn't understand the full extent of the plan. Mr. Lawrence is more problematic. He has a history of providing illegally obtained prescription drugs. From their initial statements, it appears Ms. Dawson was the primary architect of the plot, but all 3 will face serious charges. I nodded, processing this information. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sadness for Marcus. Had he truly been manipulated by Olivia, drawn into a plot he didn't fully comprehend? Or was his apparent reluctance merely a performance designed to minimize his own culpability? I would likely never know for certain. We'll need your formal statement, Detective Morgan continued, but it can wait until morning if you prefer. We have officers securing the scene and collecting evidence. A female officer can stay with you if you'd like company. I think I'd prefer to be alone, actually, I said, somewhat surprised to discover this was true. After months of fear and vigilance, the sudden safety was almost disorienting. Though I wouldn't mind a ride home if that's possible. Of course. I can arrange for an officer to drive you back to town whenever you're ready. I glanced around the room, at the rumpled bed where I was supposed to have been drugged into vulnerability, at the bathroom where my accident would have occurred, at the windows beyond which the lake gleamed in the police floodlights, this place that had been intended as the setting for my death. I'm ready now, I decided. There's nothing for me here. While the detective made arrangements, I gathered my belongings, carefully retrieving all the recording devices I had placed throughout the room. The evidence they contained would be crucial in the coming legal proceedings, though Olivia's explicit confession had provided more than enough for an immediate arrest. Downstairs, the cottage had been transformed into an active crime scene. Evidence markers dotted the kitchen counter where my drugged water had been prepared. Officers photographed the pill bottle from my bedside table. In the living room, a man I didn't recognize, presumably Lawrence, sat handcuffed and scowling beside 2 uniformed officers. Marcus was nowhere to be seen, already transported to the station, I assumed. I felt a curious absence of emotion regarding him, neither anger nor pity, just a hollow acknowledgement of his role in what had nearly happened to me. As I was escorted to a waiting police car, I paused on the porch, turning to look back at the cottage. In another reality, the one Olivia had planned, my body would have been discovered here tomorrow, a tragic accident that would have surprised no one given my supposed cognitive decline. Instead, I was walking away alive, clear-headed, and with the truth finally exposed. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to hasten my death, Olivia had instead hastened her own downfall. The drive back to town was largely silent. The young officer assigned to transport me made a few attempts at conversation, but seemed to understand. When I responded with only brief replies that I preferred quiet. The events of the evening, of the past months really, were still settling within me, pieces of a painful puzzle finally arranged into a complete, if disturbing, picture. By the time we reached my house, dawn was breaking, pale light creeping across the eastern sky. The officer insisted on checking the property before allowing me to enter, a precaution I appreciated, even though I knew there was no longer any immediate threat. "All clear, ma'am," he reported after a thorough inspection. Detective Morgan asked me to remind you that an officer will be stationed outside for the next 48 hours, just as a precaution. And she'll be by later today to take your formal statement. I thanked him, then watched from the porch as he returned to his patrol car, parking it at the curb with a clear view of my front door. The neighborhood was just beginning to stir. Lights coming on in windows, the occasional car backing out of a driveway as early commuters began their day. Normal life continuing, utterly unaware of how completely my world had been upended overnight. Inside, I moved through the house slowly, reacquainting myself with each room as if returning from a long journey rather than a single night away. In a sense, I supposed I was returning from a journey, one that had taken me through betrayal, danger, and ultimately to a truth I had spent years avoiding. In the kitchen, I set down my overnight bag and prepared a cup of tea, the first in months that I could drink without fear of what might be hidden in it. As the kettle boiled, I glanced at the refrigerator door, where photographs were held by magnets. Olivia's college graduation, her engagement announcement, holiday gatherings where we smiled side by side, the picture of familial contentment. Illusions, all of them. Carefully staged scenes in a performance that had stretched across decades. I removed each photo methodically, placing them in a neat stack on the counter. Later, I would decide what to do with them. Store them away, perhaps, or dispose of them entirely, but for now, it was enough to clear them from my sight, to begin the process of reclaiming my home from the shadows of deception that had filled it for so long. With my tea in hand, I settled into my favorite chair by the living room window, watching as the neighborhood continued to wake around me. The officer remained vigilant in his car at the curb, a tangible reminder that I was protected now, that the danger had passed. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I felt a curious sensation spreading through me. Not happiness exactly, it was too soon for that. But something adjacent to it, something with the potential to grow into contentment eventually. It took me a moment to identify the feeling correctly. Freedom. The days following Olivia's arrest passed in a blur of formal statements, evidence processing, and preliminary legal proceedings. Detective Morgan proved to be not just competent, but compassionate, shielding me from media inquiries and ensuring I was kept informed at every step. "The district attorney is pursuing maximum charges," she explained during one of her visits to my home. "The evidence is overwhelming, especially the recorded confession. Ms. Dawson has been denied bail due to the severity of the charges and the calculated nature of the crime." I nodded, accepting this information with a strange detachment. The reality of what had happened, of what had nearly happened, still felt somewhat distant, as if I were observing someone else's tragedy rather than my own. "And Marcus?" I asked. Though he had been a willing participant in the plot, I couldn't help feeling he had been influenced by Olivia's stronger personality. "Mr. Hargrove is cooperating fully," Detective Morgan said. He's accepted a plea deal in exchange for testifying against Ms. Dawson and Mr. Lawrence. He'll still serve time, but considerably less than if he'd gone to trial. I wasn't sure how to feel about that. Relief that he'd admitted his role? Disappointment that he'd been weak enough to participate in the first place? In the end, I settled for simple acknowledgement. Marcus had made his choices, just as Olivia had made hers. Lawrence, the so-called pharmacist who had supplied the drugs intended to facilitate my accident, had an extensive criminal record. With the additional charges stemming from his role in the murder conspiracy, he was facing decades in prison. It's likely to be at least a year before the case goes to trial, Detective Morgan warned. These proceedings can move slowly, especially with complex evidence and multiple defendants. A year. The thought of living with this hanging over me for so long was daunting, but I reminded myself that at least I would be living, something Olivia had intended to prevent. The most immediate practical concern was financial. My accounts had been temporarily frozen as investigators traced Olivia's various attempts to access or control my assets. Barbara helped me set up emergency funds and navigate the legal complexities. "This will get sorted out," she assured me over coffee in my kitchen. "But in the meantime, you need to think about what comes next. What do you want your life to look like now, Elaine?" I hadn't allowed myself to consider that question yet. For so long, my life had revolved around Olivia, supporting her, making excuses for her, centering my existence on her needs and wants. Without that false relationship anchoring me, who was I? What did I want? "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I've spent decades defining myself as Olivia's grandmother. I need to rediscover who I am without that role." Barbara nodded, understanding in her eyes. "That's a journey worth taking." The first step in that journey came unexpectedly. Mrs. Kravitz, from next door, the neighbor Olivia had told I was suffering from dementia, appeared on my doorstep with a homemade casserole and obvious discomfort. "I heard what happened," she said hesitantly. "I feel terrible for believing what she said about you." I invited her in, served us both tea, and found myself sharing parts of the story, not the most painful details, but enough to help her understand. "How did you find the strength to face it?" she asked, genuine admiration in her voice. The question caught me off guard. I had never thought of my actions as particularly strong or brave, just necessary for survival. "I suppose," I said slowly, "I realized I deserved the truth, no matter how painful. And I deserved to live without deception, even if that meant living alone." Later, after Mrs. Kravitz had gone, I found myself repeating those words in my mind. I deserved the truth. I deserved to live without deception. Perhaps that was the foundation upon which I could begin to build whatever came next. 6 months after Olivia's arrest, spring arrived with a gentleness that seemed at odds with the harshness of recent events. I stood in my backyard, surveying the garden beds I had neglected during the turmoil of the previous year. Weeds had claimed territory among the perennials, and the rose bushes Harold had so lovingly tended looked wild and unkempt. It was time to reclaim this space, just as I was slowly reclaiming my life. I began with small steps, pulling weeds, pruning dead branches, clearing away the debris of winter. The physical labor was therapeutic, grounding me in the present moment rather than the painful past or uncertain future. Each day I worked a little longer, accomplished a little more, until gradually the garden began to resemble its former self. But I didn't stop there. I visited the local nursery and selected new plants, varieties I had always admired but never grown, colors that appealed to my personal taste rather than Olivia's preferences. I installed a small fountain whose gentle bubbling filled the air with soothing sound. I added a comfortable bench positioned to catch the morning sun, a place where I could sit with my tea and begin each day in peaceful contemplation. The garden became a metaphor for my larger life. Things I had postponed or abandoned for Olivia's sake were carefully, tentatively reintroduced. I rejoined the book club I had left when Olivia's weekend visits had taken precedence. I reconnected with former colleagues from the law firm, discovering that many were eager to renew our friendship. Most significantly, I enrolled in a watercolor painting class at the community center, something I had expressed interest in decades ago, only to have Olivia dismiss it as a waste of time when you could be helping with my college applications. My first attempts were awkward, hesitant, the results barely recognizable as the landscapes they were intended to represent. But the instructor was patient, and there was something profoundly liberating about creating purely for my own satisfaction, with no one to please but myself. "You're getting better," Barbara observed one afternoon, examining a small painting of my garden fountain that I had recently completed. "There's more confidence in the brushstrokes." "I'm enjoying the process," I admitted. "It's not about the result." Barbara smiled, understanding the deeper meaning behind my words. My entire life had been focused on results, raising Olivia successfully, creating the perfect family environment, presenting an image of multi-generational harmony to the world. Now I was learning to value the journey itself, however imperfect. This thigh. Legal proceedings continued in the background of my newly emerging life. Olivia maintained her not guilty plea despite the overwhelming evidence, necessitating a full trial. Marcus, true to his plea agreement, provided detailed testimony about the evolution of the murder plot, painting Olivia as the mastermind who had manipulated him into participation. I attended the pre-trial hearings as required, giving my testimony with a calm steadiness that seemed to unnerve Olivia more than any display of emotion would have. She sat at the defense table, expensively dressed despite her incarceration, watching me with cold, assessing eyes, still calculating, still planning, even now. Our gazes met only once during my testimony. I didn't see remorse or shame in her expression, only a sort of frustrated fury that her carefully constructed plans had unraveled. I looked away first, not out of intimidation, but because I recognized that there was nothing there for me. No answers, no closure, certainly no love. As summer arrived, bringing longer days and warmer temperatures, I made a decision that surprised. Even me. I listed my house for sale. "Are you sure?" Barbara asked when I told her. "You've lived there for so long. That's part of the problem," I explained. "Every room holds memories I'd rather leave behind, and it's larger than I need now." There was another reason, one I didn't articulate fully, even to Barbara. The house represented the life I had built. Around Olivia, the decisions made with her at the center. Selling it was a tangible way of acknowledging that life was over, and that a new one was beginning. The property sold quickly, to a young family with 2 small children who fell in love with the garden I had so carefully restored. I found satisfaction in knowing that the space would be filled with genuine family connections, with the noise and activity of children growing up loved and secure. I purchased a small, sun-filled condominium in a community designed for active seniors. It offered security, companionship if I wanted it, and independence when I preferred solitude. Most importantly, it had no history, no shadows of betrayal lingering in its corners. Moving was both practical challenge and emotional catharsis. Each item I packed required a decision: keep, donate, discard. Some choices were easy: Harold's books, his collection of jazz records, the photographs of our early years together before Olivia entered our lives. Others were more difficult: Olivia's childhood artwork, her school awards, tangible reminders of the person I had believed she was or could become. In the end, I kept very little from those years. Not out of bitterness or denial, but because I recognized that clinging to physical reminders of a relationship that had never truly existed would only hinder my healing. The day I moved into my new home coincided with notification from the district attorney that a trial date had finally been set. Olivia would face a jury 3 months hence, with every expectation that the evidence would result in conviction on all charges. I received this news with surprising equanimity. The outcome of the trial, while important for justice, no longer defined my daily existence. I had moved, literally and figuratively, to a place where Olivia's actions could not determine my happiness or security. That evening, I stood on the small balcony of my new home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. Inside, boxes remained to be unpacked, furniture to be arranged, walls to be decorated with my own modest watercolors rather than the carefully curated family photographs that had once defined my surroundings. There was work to be done, a space, to be transformed into a true reflection of myself rather than a shrine to family connections that had proven hollow. But I faced that work with something I hadn't expected to find again: anticipation. Even, perhaps, a quiet joy. For the first time in decades, my future was entirely my own to shape. The trial ended as everyone expected, with Olivia's conviction on all counts. The evidence was simply too overwhelming, the recorded confession too explicit to be explained away. The judge, citing the calculated nature of the crime and Olivia's complete lack of remorse, imposed the maximum sentence, 30 years without possibility of parole. I attended the sentencing hearing not out of a desire for vengeance, but from a sense that my presence was necessary to fully close this chapter of my life. As Olivia was led away in handcuffs, she turned briefly in my direction. I expected hatred, perhaps a final threat or accusation. Instead, her expression was blank, almost indifferent, as if I were a stranger whose existence held no significance for her. Perhaps in her mind that was true. Perhaps I had never been more than a means to an end, a resource to be exploited and discarded. The realization no longer wounded me as it once would have. I had stopped defining my worth through Olivia's eyes. After the trial, there were journalists who wanted interviews, producers who suggested documentaries or true crime adaptations. I declined them all. My story was not entertainment, and my healing was not a public spectacle. Besides, the narrative they sought, the shocking betrayal, the dramatic confrontation, the satisfying justice, was only the surface of a much deeper, more complex truth. The truth was that Olivia's betrayal had forced me to confront uncomfortable realities about myself as well as her. In my desperate need to be needed, to be loved, I had ignored warning signs that would have been obvious to a more clear-eyed observer. I had enabled behaviors that should have been addressed, excused actions that deserved consequences, created an environment where manipulation was rewarded rather than confronted. This wasn't self-blame. I understood that Olivia's choices were her own, that her capacity for calculated cruelty reflected something broken within her that likely no amount of perfect parenting could have fixed. But acknowledging my own blind spots was essential to ensuring I wouldn't repeat those patterns in whatever relationships the future might hold. 1 year after moving into my new home, I received an unexpected letter. The return address indicated it was from the women's correctional facility where Olivia was serving her sentence. My first instinct was to throw it away unopened. What could she possibly say that would matter now? But curiosity, or perhaps some lingering need for understanding, led me to carefully open the envelope. Inside was a single page covered in Olivia's precise handwriting. It wasn't an apology. That would have been too much to expect, and likely insincere anyway. Instead, it was a request for money to be deposited in her commissary account, for legal books to aid in her appeal, for regular visits to break the monotony of prison life. The letter was perfectly crafted to appeal to the person she believed me to be, the doting grandmother so desperate for connection that she would overlook any transgression, forgive any cruelty, if it meant maintaining the illusion of family. I read it twice, then placed it carefully in a folder with the other documentation from the case, not because I intended to respond or comply, but because it served as a reminder of how far I had come and how far I still needed to go in fully breaking free from the dysfunctional dynamics that had defined so much of my life. I never replied to that letter or to the 3 others that followed at irregular intervals over the next year. Eventually, they stopped coming. Perhaps Olivia finally understood that her manipulations no longer worked, or perhaps she simply found other targets for her schemes. Either way, the silence between us became permanent, a mutual acknowledgement that whatever had connected us was irrevocably severed. Life continued to unfold in unexpected ways. The community where I had purchased my condominium offered more opportunities for genuine connection than I had anticipated. I joined a garden committee, contributing my restored skills to the shared spaces. My watercolor painting improved enough that several pieces were featured in a local gallery's senior showcase. I even, somewhat to my surprise, developed a close friendship with a retired literature professor who shared my love of mystery novels and jazz music. "You seem different from when we first met," he observed one evening as we shared dinner at a small restaurant near our complex. "More present, more yourself." I considered his words carefully. "I spent most of my life being who others needed me to be," I said finally. "I'm still discovering who I actually am." He nodded, understanding without requiring the full story. That was another lesson I had learned. Intimacy didn't necessarily mean sharing every painful detail of my past. Some things could remain private without creating barriers to genuine connection. On the 2nd anniversary of Olivia's arrest, I visited Harold's grave for the first time since the trial. I brought fresh flowers and a heart full of reflections to share with the man who had been my partner through so much of life's journey. "You saw what I couldn't see," I told him quietly, arranging the blooms against his headstone. "You tried to warn me in your gentle way. I wish I had listened." A soft breeze stirred the leaves of the cemetery's ancient oaks, a sound like a whispered response. I smiled, imagining Harold's perspective on all that had happened. His sadness at Olivia's betrayal, but his pride in how I had ultimately faced it. "I'm doing well," I continued. "Better than I expected. There's a freedom in starting over at 76 that I never anticipated. When you've already lost what you thought was most precious, there's not much left to fear." That was perhaps the most profound lesson of this painful journey, that survival itself can be transformative. Having weathered the worst betrayal imaginable, having looked death in the face and refused to surrender, I found myself strangely liberated from many of the fears and insecurities that had previously defined my existence. I no longer worried about being alone. I had discovered the difference between solitude and loneliness. I no longer feared disapproval or rejection. I had learned that my worth was not determined by others' assessment. I no longer dreaded the unknown future. I had found that unexpected. Beginnings can emerge from what appear to be devastating endings. As I left the cemetery that day, I felt Harold's presence beside me, not as a ghost or supernatural visitation, but as the accumulated wisdom of our years together, the love that had been genuine in a landscape of deception. "The truth really does set you free," I murmured to myself, a confirmation rather than a revelation. Walking slowly back to my car, I passed a young family visiting a nearby grave, a grandmother about my age, a woman who appeared to be her daughter, and a little girl of perhaps 7 or 8. The child was carefully placing stones on the grave marker, her expression solemn but not frightened. The women stood close together, their postures suggesting mutual support. Shared grief transformed into connection rather than division. I watched them for a moment, thinking about the intricate, fragile web of family relationships, how they can sustain us or destroy us, depending not just on circumstance, but on the fundamental character of those involved. There was no guarantee that these 3 generations of women would maintain their evident closeness and support. But there was possibility, potential, hope, for them, and for all of us navigating the complex territory of human connection. Back home, I settled on my balcony with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the western sky with familiar golden light. My life was quieter now, simpler in many ways, but it was authentically mine, shaped by my choices, reflecting my values, free from the poisonous influence of false love and hidden agendas. The teacup in my hands was one I had purchased recently, part of a small, elegant set that appealed to my personal taste. It contained nothing but the fragrant Earl Grey I had selected for myself. I drank deeply, savoring both the flavor and the knowledge that what appeared to be offered in love actually was. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to see the truth, however painful. And sometimes the most profound act of self-love is walking away from those who cannot or will not love us as we deserve to be loved. My granddaughter had handed me water with poison. But in doing so, she had unwittingly offered something else as well. The opportunity to finally break free from illusion, to rebuild a life based on truth rather than wishful thinking. For that unexpected gift of clarity, I had found a measure of gratitude. The final, surprising chapter in a story I never expected to live, much less survive. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.